There we are. Welcome in, everyone, to my law investigation stream. We're on episode 9. How's everyone doing? Nice to see you all in the chat. The chat's quite lively, which is nice to see. Yeah, been a bit of a hiatus on the law investigation streams. I was actually going to do it this time last week, but yeah, something came up, so I had to postpone it until today. So if I'm a little bit higgledy-piggledy, that's possibly why, because I had like the structure of the show ready-made last week. So I'm like just looking at my notes again. I'm thinking like, what did I mean in certain places? But hopefully we'll figure it out as we go along. So welcome in Matt, of course, at the top there. Journey SG1, Ginger Fairy, Bonsoir to you too, my buddy. Retro Godfather, scrolling down the chat a little bit. Senhek, Ninty Gold, evening all. Thanks for joining. Flying Waffle, nice to see you. And Terry, of course. Rhino, had a bit of a trim, yes, mate. Preparation for tomorrow's event. Got to look my best. The Sonic show, and also. Oh yeah, I've recorded a show on Tuesday, so I had it cut Tuesday, so I looked pretty good in the show with Matt on Tuesday, and then, yeah, preparation for today. It's grown slightly, just probably the right length now. Anyone that's going out to the Sonic Symphony show tomorrow? No worries, Matt. I'm sure you'll find the time, buddy. Right, guys, so I just realised I sounded like that TikTok guy that starts every TikTok with "Right Guys." I think their TikTok channel is actually called The Right Guys, isn't it? But right, guys. Let me pull my notes up here. So today we're going to be looking at a few different things. So I did actually play back the previous episode early while I was working to try and get a bit of a rundown of what I was on about, because it was that long ago. So we sort of ended last episode's show by looking at the Forbidden Temple, or Forbidden City. I always say temple, but the Forbidden City, where the Imperial treasures were held during each of the dynasties. Obviously, the last emperor, who we're going to look into a little bit more detail today, finished his reign, was it 1910 or 1912 or something like that? And then, in theory, all of the imperial treasures came with him to wherever he went. I think we did read a little bit about how he managed to stay within the Forbidden City for a period of time. I'm not sure how long. But he wasn't very well. He was only 4 at the time, and I think he only stayed there until maybe he was like 16, getting on for 20, something like that. I might be making that completely up. But what he did, and we found that out, and it'll probably be covered again today. But he sold off a lot of the treasures for like money and a lot of properties and that sort of stuff he was buying or whatever. He actually used a lot of the imperial treasures to fund some dodgy deals and that sort of stuff. And yeah, because we were trying to relate it to Shenmue in the sense that the Phantom Riverstone mirrors, the Phoenix and the Dragon, when combined, apparently are a key to unlock the treasures of the Qing Dynasty, which I'm assuming are actual treasures from that era, which would be these imperial treasures. That's what Ren is actually wanting to be involved in 4. That's the reason behind that. So yeah, let's just get stuck in. Close that. Just an image, of course. So we're going to start with a little bit of context first before we delve into some of the actual deep lore stuff. We're going to start with Hiki's blog here, which is a little bit of a theory on Shenhua's parents. We can actually watch that cutscene first before we get stuck in. I know I've played this cutscene quite a lot.
Really?
but unfortunately we're going to have to keep covering it for context, otherwise anyone new watching these shows might not understand what I'm on about. So these are of course Shenhua's real parents, and in particular we'll be taking a look at the outfits that they're wearing a little bit later, because there's I think it was Joe Kitchen came in one of the previous Law Investigation episodes, and he was talking about how the clothing that these characters wear are actually like a certain rank within the imperial structure, and he actually alluded to these types of clothing being the rank below Emperor and Empress. We'll look into that a little bit later. But the reason I've got Hiki's blog post up is because she's somewhat alluding to the fact that they might be the Emperor and the Empress. So I thought it would be a nice little way to begin, and then at the end we can come up with hopefully a little bit of a conclusion to where we think these two characters actually sit in the rankings.
The Shenmue tree has its flowers in bloom again this year.
Shenhua, a beautiful flower.
I know. We will name our child Shenhua.
Shenhua, that is wonderful. The Shenmue tree shall protect her.
The other thing to note as we work away into, I've got like a video that tells us about the different Chinese dynasties, or dynasties, however you pronounce that word. And obviously this isn't modern era, is it? This isn't present day, especially if this is the same Shenmue tree that we're led to believe is the one that's outside Shenhua's house. Because if it is, you know, where the heck has all this stuff gone? This actually, and we've covered this in a previous lore investigation stream when we were looking at like the different locations within Shenmue. This could potentially be Liyuan, who we've looked at in quite detail. I think I even suggested it could be a place called like Jizu Park or something. I forget the name of the park that we were looking at, but there was like these sort of bridges and like a nice building in the background. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what era this is from. That in itself is quite an interesting bit of lore, because obviously Shenhua is a baby here. So if she's only, is it 16 when you meet her in real life, and you know Ryo and Shenhua, she's 16, but this is a completely different type of vibe going on here. And she obviously says that she's experienced 100 birthdays or something. So this may not even be the modern day, you know, this, it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Or it could just be a literal, this was 16 years ago. I don't know. In Liyuan. But there's just a lot of like confusing bits of chat and stuff between characters that sort of add more questions than actually answer. So, yes, we were going to do this. So this is Hiki's blog post. Zoom in a little bit as well. So, post's got spoilers. We've already spoiled it, guys, by watching that cutscene. I'm sure everyone in the chat here is well aware of the ending of Shenmue 2 by now. So, Hiki writes, in Shenmue 2, we see a flashback of Shenhua's parents. In this blog post, I will talk about the scene. I will talk about Yuan as well, which is, well, she actually says here, Shenhua's adoptive father. And I will talk about my theory of who Shenhua's parents actually are. So in this part of the game, Shenhua shows the Shenmue tree to Ryo. She says that the Shenmue tree holds a special meaning for her, and then after the flashback with her parents begins that we just watched. So in the flashback, we see a beautiful place with a lot of trees. All these trees are Shenmue trees. Is there more than one? Yeah, actually there is. Yeah, interesting. Maybe one is a Shenmue tree, but maybe the others are Shenmue trees as well. We don't know yet. but probably there are at least 2 Shenmue trees in the story, one in Bailu Village and one in Liyuan. And that's quite an interesting point when you think about like how they're all connected. Could there potentially be one in the Hazuki residence as well? They're all sort of linked. I think someone did mention like ley lines or something at one point. These trees are just planted on like a line that happens to run from, I guess, from Japan to China to Liyuan to Bailu Village to Ternary Spring. I don't know. In my opinion, this place is not Bailu Village. This place is probably Liyuan, the old capital of China, and the place in the tapestry in Shenhua's house. In the flashback, we see Shenhua's parents looking at a baby near the Shenmue tree. This baby is Shenhua. In the game, there is nothing about their names. We still don't know the names of Shenhua's parents. That's interesting, actually. Are they not credited anywhere, or in a guide, or on ShenWiki? Apparently not. I wonder what it says in the credits for like voice role, like, because I picked up on Liesl Wilkerson doing the voice of Shenhua's mother. Just says Shenhua's mother, maybe. The dialogue between Shenhua's parents is in this way. So the Shenmue tree as its flowers bloom again. Just add this, haven't we? So I'm going to name the child after the flower of the tree. Petal, rather. Tree's going to protect her. So after the flashback ends, this is the only flashback with Shenhua's parents in the Shenmue series. In Shenmue 3, Shenhua says to Ryo that she has vivid dreams where she's in a city where the Emperor once lived long ago. The Emperor that we're going to be looking at in today, I imagine. Or could it be a different Emperor? I think it would have to be this Emperor to fit in with the sort of ongoing Shenmue story. A father and mother stood before her, and she was just born and they spoke a name. So yeah, she's sort of saying there a very loose description of this particular flashback that we've seen, right? So she's had a vivid dream where she's in a city where the Emperor once lived long ago, and her father and mother stood before her, and she was just born and they spoke a name. So actually, she's actually distancing the Emperor from her mother and father. She's not saying like, you know, it's like there's a third person there as well. There's a father, mother, and Emperor. The city where the Emperor once lived. So that could be the first clue that they're not the Emperor and Empress. I'm not sure. This city that Shenhua mentioned is probably Luoyang. The scene with Shenhua talking about the city has a connection to Shenhua's parents' flashback in Shenmue 2. In another part of Shenmue 2, we see Shenhua, while Hiki's put about 5 years old, we see her swinging and the Shenmue tree, but no sign of her parents there, and we can clearly see that this is now Bailu Village. In one scene with Ryo, she says that her parents died, that she didn't know how they died. Yunshen Yuan raised her, but how Yunshen Yuan knew Shenhua's parents? That's interesting. What happened for parents to give up, you know, this newborn child who they're obviously taking care of at the time? Something must have come in the way. And obviously they had to put the trust in Mr. Yuan. How did Mr. Yuan know? Well, he's the mirror carver guy, isn't he? So, or is it his grandfather? I mean, I'm losing me a little bit of Shenmue lore now. It's Yuan's grandfather, right? Who did the mirror. The actual mirror for the Emperor. Is that right? Yeah, his grandfather. So I guess, if you think about it in those terms, I think Shenhua's parents have to be connected to the Emperor. If they're not the Emperor and Empress, I think they have to have been working for the Emperor in some degree. Potentially, could a father be the envoy who met up with Yuan's grandfather with the mirror plans, and then he's like, oh, you know, this could be a nice place for Shenhua to thingy when everything went tits up. It's like a secluded village. It took him a while to get there. It's like the perfect place. You know, maybe the Yuan family was nice. But then if you think about it, then that does put Shenhua's timeline out, doesn't it? Because if she's only 16 and Mr. Yuan is, what, 65 here, for his grandfather to have made the mirror in 1910, he would have been... maybe he wasn't even born. 87 minus... How old's Mr. Yuan? I'm going to have to get this information up a second. Shenmue, Mr. Yuan. Age is unknown. Okay. So if I was to say he was 65, or do we think he's younger than that? I'm just thinking this is 1987 now. Well, not this image, but you know what I mean in real life. When I say in real life, I mean in current day Shenmue. So say he's 65, take 65 off 87, and you've got 22, 1922. So in 1910, he'd have been 12. And his grandfather, that's probably about the right sort of age, generation to generation to generation. If his grandfather was, say, 65, 70 odd or something, making these mirrors for the emperor, that completely skews the timeline for Shenhua, doesn't it, really? Because 16 years ago is only 1961. No, 1971. 71. So she's born in 71, I think. $100 years would work. You know, she says she's experienced 100 birthdays. So when Shenhua's parents died... Oh, she does say that her parents died, right? So I wonder what killed off her parents. Do we think it would have been like a dragon and a phoenix sort of collision again? Mirrors in the wrong hands when they were made. Tricky to understand. Hopefully we get more answers at some point. Second, I'm going to cough here. I don't know, but I wonder what happened at the time, how Shenhua's parents died. Probably has something to do with mirrors. Maybe Shenhua's parents had the mirrors and someone killed Shenhua's parents to get the mirrors. I think this is possible. See, if... Going off my theory just that, say, Shenhua's father was the envoy, potentially, could have been the envoy. He got the mirrors made by Mr. Yuan's grandfather and then took them back to the emperor and maybe on the way got done off, I don't know. Or something broke out somewhere. Did Shenhua's parents, before dying, ask Yun Shen Yuan to take care of Shenhua? In my opinion, it was probably this way. Probably something bad happened with Shenhua's parents. Before Shenhua's parents died, Yun Shen Yuan accepted their request to take care of Shenhua. That's what Hiki thinks. Who are Shenhua's parents? In my opinion, Shenhua's parents are probably from the Emperor and Empress family. I say that because the house in the flashback is big. Shenhua's parents' clothes and much more give me this vibe about these characters. This house and Shenhua's parents gives me a feeling that with this flashback we saw a little bit of the Emperor and Empress story, and then we saw a little bit of Liu Wang, and in Shenmue 3 we saw that an Emperor envoy went to Bailey Village because of the mirrors. Maybe Shenhua's parents are actually the Emperor and Empress. Probably Shenhua's parents had the mirrors at one point in the story. Maybe someone from the Chiyu Men knew and then killed Shenhua's parents to get the mirrors. Possibly the one pulling the strings, Tentai. Maybe Yun Shen Yuan arrived there in the last moments, then Shenhua's parents asked Yun Shen Yuan to take care of Shenhua. I think it was something like this. If we see this flashback, I think it would be one of the most emotional moments of the Shenmue series. I really feel that Ryo and Shenhua will go to Liyuan in Shenmue 4, and probably in Liyuan we will see more revelations about Shenhua's parents, the mirrors, the Shenmue tree, and even about Shenhua's powers. If Shenmue 4 happens, I hope that we see more revelations about these things. To me, the story about Shenhua's parents is an interesting and mysterious part of the story of Shenmue. And she's just sort of asking what your opinions are. So yeah, there is quite a few questions within this that we could think about. Obviously the main one is like, what era is this? Who are they as such? And what's their relationship with the Emperor? She mentions the envoy. The Emperor envoy that went to Bailu village because of the mirrors. So for a little bit more context, we're going to be watching... Well, at the moment, I'm going to go for the mirrors videos for a bit of information on the mirrors before we get into this all of the dynasties video that I'm excited to get into. ASE14, welcome in. Buddy, Mini Shenmue 24, hello, welcome in. What are your thoughts so far, guys? It's confused now, it all intertwines, right? So yeah, let's do this mirror stuff next. These are just lovely cutscenes in general anyway.
Hazuki Sensei's boy.
So my transition here, or segue rather, is the fact that obviously the envoy actually comes to request these mirrors to be made in this particular cutscene.
I could really use your expertise again.
Of course, provided it's something I am familiar with. Is it about the sword handguard from the other day?
Hey, Richard.
No, it's about this.
May I take a look?
Marvelous.
What a marvelous stone phoenix mirror. Stone mirrors were produced in China during ancient times. This is an exceptional piece.
Is there anything unusual about this one?
Indeed there is. I think perhaps this type of precious stone is only found in the Guilin region.
Precious stone?
According to a book I once read long ago, an emperor ordered a sculptor from Guilin to engrave a guardian onto a stone mirror.
That is why this cutscene has gone from like an 8 to a 10 now. Because you've got Oishi-san here, he's actually recalling a story he's read in a book of the Emperor ordering, you know, an envoy to go to Bailu village to get this mirror that he's actually now holding and he's handmade, which is a bit of a mind-blowing thing. And then obviously at some point in the future, because this is Shenmue 1, Ryo travels to said village and actually learns about the story that Oishi-san's read in a book in person, basically. And yeah, he's kind of like intertwined within this sort of narrative. And it's just amazing that they've planted the seeds all the way back in Shenmue 1 with this storyline that you don't even think about at the time. You know, you're still focused on finding Landi or sailors or the Mad Angels, you know what I mean, or where the harbour is. Take this mirror to Master Chen. This little cutscene here, this passing comment from Oishi-san, you don't even think about. That's how insane it is. It's like layered. You know those films where you have to watch them like a second or third time to like understand what was happening in a certain cutscene because they're that layered. It's kind of like just happening here. I wonder if this is the book, by the way. That is the kanji for big. Big book of emperor facts.
Guardian.
The
I made that
phoenix
last bit
on
up.
this mirror is a guardian.
Is there any connection between the phoenix and the stone from Guilin?
Well, I really can't speculate, but considering
And
the
this scene's
legend
missable.
associated
You're right.
with this mirror, undoubtedly there is a connection.
I love that picture in the background as well. I've never really noticed that. In fact, I mean, it would be nice to actually see this in game because it looks like some guy sat on a throne. Maybe even an emperor. He could be like really into this Chinese folklore stuff.
I see. Well then, thank you very much for your help.
You're welcome.
We could actually check that out if anyone wants to see that picture. I can make 5 minutes for that.
Oh, Rio. Is this a good time?
What's on your mind?
I want to show you something.
What is it?
This.
What an unusual stone mirror.
Apparently, it is called the Phoenix Mirror.
I see. There is a phoenix carved into it.
Is there anything special about this mirror?
Well, the phoenix is a sacred bird of legend. But this has an ominous feel.
Ominous?
In China, there are many treasures that contain both good and bad fortune. This is called
Treasures.
the secret of yin and yang.
The secret of yin and yang?
You'd best be careful. This may have something to do with your father's unfortunate death.
Unfortunate death.
I don't know if this information helps, but that's all I can tell you.
I see. Thank you very much.
Aoi-san is Master Chen's brother.
Hello.
Oh, Hazuki-san.
Thanks for your help the
Yin
other
and
day.
Yang is mentioned a lot in the series, isn't it?
But can I ask for your help with one more thing?
There's a lot of like the opposites themes going on.
It's about this mirror. Can you tell me anything about
Even
it?
with the mirrors, like the
Let
Dragon
me
and
see
Phoenix.
This is a very unusual mirror.
It's called the Phoenix Mirror.
Phoenix. In China, the phoenix is the legendary bird of fortune. It's a guardian for the Sky Lord.
Guardian?
The other guardian is the dragon.
A dragon.
In China, people consider the North Star to be the lord of the sky. Look there. That is an old Chinese map in stone.
We've seen this one quite a lot, this
It's a
cutscene.
map of the Big Dipper from the Han Dynasty.
Han Dynasty.
On a
Someone else mentions the
moonless
Tang
night,
Dynasty. That might be the Master Chen one.
should you pray to the stars, your wishes shall be realized. The Big Dipper revolves around the immovable North Star. In China, the North Star is highly respected. For ages and ages, people have worshipped it. In China, there are numerous fascinating legends about the stars.
I see. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's one of my favourite cutscenes as well. I love how it transitions into the stars and Shenhua and then transitions back to Rio. Such a well choreographed cutscene. And the last one, Master Chen. I think Master Chen mentions the Tang Dynasty.
Mirror. Yes, it's made of phantom river stone.
Why did Landy only steal the dragon mirror?
He probably didn't realize your father had both of them.
Someone says Tang Dynasty, don't they? I'm sure they do.
2 mirrors.
A long time ago, Zhu Yuanda once told me, when the dragon and the phoenix meet, the gates of heaven and earth will open, and Qi Yu will resurrect itself on earth.
Ji Yu.
It's a legendary Chinese monster that will devour this world of ours. It appears Lan Di will try to make use of both mirrors.
What will he try?
That even I don't know, but you mustn't allow him to get that mirror. Be careful and stay alert.
If he finds that mirror, it will be the end of you.
Huh?
There's a little bit. Is there a little bit after this cutscene? Might be a little bit after that cutscene where I've got like a playthrough of Shenmue 1 where they chat a little bit after that. Not sure if I ever actually got a Shenmue 1 playthrough. Let's go for this guy. I pretty much use this guy's playthroughs a lot in this lore stream. So if you are ever watching Ikurai Gaming, thank you very much. Seeing Oishi-san, he's getting the mirror. I think it's a scene, here we go. For that timing, guys. Clicked.
2 mirrors! Landy-sama will be pleased! Gui-Chen!
Oh!
I won't forget this! Ah!
So I'm sure they chat a little bit more now. This is what I was thinking of, I think.
Thanks.
Is it the work of the Mad Angels?
Mad
So
Angels?
it's just about Mad Angels.
We always have trouble with that gang. Those dirty bastards.
That thing was probably connected to the Qi Yu men.
The Qi Yu men.
Yes, the Chiyo men and Mad Angels are linked.
Perhaps they are the ones who guided Lan Di here.
So, if I find the Mad Angels, I'll find Landy.
Nah, he's likely not here anymore.
Then where did he go?
Well, maybe he has already gone to Hong Kong.
Hong Kong? I have a request.
Request? What is it?
Please
It's a
help
nice
me
little cutscene with the mirror here. Watch this.
get Hong Kong.
Hong Kong?
With this. Even a starving eagle never steals. Right, I think I bored you enough with that now, so let's crack into this Chinese Dynasties or Dynasties video. Yeah, so the reason I was looking out for a mention of the Tang Dynasty, I can't quite remember what, I'm sure someone says Tang Dynasty, but I've got to look out for Tang Dynasty within this because Shenhua's parents, Liu Yuang, That's literally all I wrote, so I can't remember what I was thinking.
Hi everyone,
let's
and welcome
find
to
out.
Learn Chinese Now. China has a 5,000-year history, and today we are going to look at China's most important dynasties and historical periods in order.
Let me know the volume levels,
Early
guys.
Chinese history starts with legend. China has a story about a great flood in a similar way that Western civilization does. And after that, a man named Yu was assigned by the last of the legendary sage emperors, Shun, to tame the waters. Yu dug channels to allow the water to flow out to the sea and founded the Xia dynasty, Xia Chao, in approximately 2070 BC.
Just double check. Learn Chinese Now is the channel here. Hopefully we're okay showing this footage. It's got like nice Guilin-esque mountain thingies behind him. So I think this is the first, what was it called? The Xia dynasty. This is like super long ago. Like before Christ, isn't it? So it's like
approximately 2070 BC. Many
years
historians
ago.
view the Xia as a legendary dynasty, since no archaeological sites in China believed to be
Cheers,
Xia
Retro.
have yielded written records to confirm that they belong to the Xia dynasty. China's next dynasty is the Shang Chao. The Shang are believed to have ruled from about 1600 to 1050 BC. A feature of the Shang is the bronze artifacts that have been discovered. From cups to steamers to cauldrons, the bronzes were believed to have been used in sacrificial rituals. These bronze artifacts got progressively bigger throughout the dynasty as technology improved. By the end of the dynasty,
Imperial
they were making
treasures?
bronzes weighing up to 200 pounds. It is during the Shang that we see the earliest style of Chinese writing, the oracle bone inscriptions, Jia Gu Wen. These are pictographs written on turtle shells that Shang kings used for divination. After the Shang degenerated into what is regarded as a period of decadence and low morality, a frontier state called Zhou rose up and conquered the Shang, starting the Zhou dynasty, Zhou Chao. It was during the Zhou that the idea of the mandate of heaven, Tian Ming, came into being. A king or dynasty could only rule if they maintained heaven's favor. If a king acted tyrannically, heaven would give warnings in the form of natural disasters. If the king failed to heed these warnings, the dynasty would descend into chaos. For the first half of the Zhou dynasty, heaven seemed to be on the Zhou king's side, but the dynasty did eventually descend into chaos, beginning the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods.
oh, the Warring States periods. So this is still before Christ. Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods. So it's interesting, obviously, when Yu Suzuki was saying about the Warring States in Baisha, I think he used the word reminiscent of the Warring States. So, I guess just like a big siege war type battle, and nothing in particular law-wise relating to the Warring States. It's just like a battle similar to this kind of style. Is probably what he meant. Thinking about it, if that's the era anyway.
秋战国. Although it was chaotic, it was during this period that a series of philosophers emerged, the most famous of which, Confucius and his teachings of filial piety and the 5 Confucian virtues of Ren, benevolence, Yi, justice, Li, rituals, Zhi, wisdom, and Xin, faith, would dominate the next 2,000 years of Chinese culture. During the Spring and Autumn period, 722 to 481 BC, the Zhou king's power waned, and feudal lords started making and breaking contracts, taking hostages, and taking up arms. By the second half of this period, the Warring States period, 403 to 221 BC, the Zhou king's power was reduced to close to zero, and states started conquering each other one by one, until just 7 states were left. It was then that the Qin state in the west saw an opportunity and rose up to conquer all other 6, unifying China once again under the Qin dynasty.
Qin dynasty. Let me just check back. So these look like they're named after the dynasties. Fortified border. It's like the Great Wall. I don't know. The Zhao capital area. These are city and towns.
It was then that the Qin state in the west saw an opportunity and rose up to conquer all other 6, unifying China once again under the Qin dynasty, 221 to 206 BC. The rulers of the Zhou dynasty had been called kings, Wang in Chinese, but the Qin's ruler invented a new term, Huangdi, or emperor.
Ooh, Huangdi. That's the yellow emperor, right?
All subsequent dynastic rulers would use. This first emperor of the Qin, Qin Shi Huang, was a brutal ruler. He solidified his unification through a unification of culture, unifying weights and measures, written language, currency, and even the width of roads throughout the empire. Maintaining local currency or weights and measures was an act of treason. The Qin emperor is thought to have buried 460 scholars alive in a mass grave as a warning against defiance. After the Qin emperor died, he had over 7,000 terracotta warriors buried with him to protect him in the afterlife. This became one of the most famous
that was him then, right?
of the Qin dynasty.
Terracotta warriors, awesome by the way, guys. If you ever get the chance to go, so impressive to like, and that's not even, how many did they say? 6,000, 7,000? I don't even know how many they've uncovered so far, but it's not, certainly not 7,000. And a lot of them are like broken, like bits of parts have come off, but you can see some actually, some have still got colour on them from like the paint that they used back in the day. Over time it sort of deoxifies, the paint comes off, and but it's still really impressive to see these figures.
The afterlife. This became one of the most famous relics.
Is that still before Christ?
But the harsh reign of the Qin didn't last long. After the first emperor died in 210 BC, the empire destabilized. 202 BC, the Qin dynasty was defeated by Liu Bang, who founded the Han dynasty, Han Chao. Sometimes referred.
So we're into the Han dynasty now, which she's just said, isn't she, the Rushy China shop lady, is the actual wall scroll plaque thing. That physical object was from the Han dynasty, I think.
As China's first golden age. The Han dynasty adopted Confucianism as the state philosophy, almost doubled its territory, and developed trade with Central Asia and the Roman Empire along the Silk Road. It was a 400-year period of prosperity. After the fall of the Han dynasty in 220 AD, China would remain divided for several centuries. Immediately after the Han fell, China entered the Three Kingdoms period, 三国时期, 220 to 265 AD. This was a period of battles between 3 contending powers. It is the subject of the classic Chinese book Romance of the Three Kingdoms, 三国演义.
Okay. That's another thing I think Yu Suzuki's referenced in the past, Romance of the Three Kingdoms. I think he referenced that alongside the Warring State stuff.
Eventually, the Wei state, with twice the population of the other two, prevailed and unified China, starting the short-lived Jin dynasty, Jin Chao. However, the Jin dynasty was far from a period of stability. Palace intrigue led to a civil war between 291 and 306. The end of the Jin dynasty's control over all of China came when Xiongnu tribesmen had settled in northern China and proved hard to govern. They decided to attack the capital Luoyang in 311 AD.
Who's attacking Luoyang? The end of the Jin dynasty's control over all of China came when Xiongnu tribesmen had settled in northern China and proved hard to govern. They decided to attack the capital, Luoyang, in 311 AD. It's still way outside of Shenmue's timeline, though.
They attacked Chang'an in 316 AD. For the next 100 years, North China became a battleground, and many citizens fled southwards to Nanjing, where the Jin had set up a government in exile. 420 to 589 AD is known as the Northern and Southern Dynasties period, Nanbei Chao. China was divided between North and South. Throughout this whole period of division, Buddhism, which had originally been introduced to China during the Han Dynasty, increased in popularity. By the year 477, North China had over 6,000 Buddhist temples, and South China had close to 3,000. Some Confucianists criticized Buddhist monks for not providing heirs to their family. However, Buddhists argued that having a member...
Is it me, or does that look like the scroll that was on Ueshi-san's wall? gonna have to have a look at that scroll, you know, at some point in the stream.
The family walked the path to enlightenment, brought blessings to all their relatives. Many rulers during this time actively supported and raised money for the building of Buddhist temples, such as Wu Di of Liang, who once had himself held hostage until his court raised a huge sum of money to have him released. This money was then used to support Buddhist establishments. Finally, in 581 AD, China was again unified by the Sui dynasty, Sui Chao. The Sui Emperor Wen Di viewed himself as a Buddhist ruler and used military force to defend the Buddhist faith. Him and his successor had ambitious plans to rebuild China, but this took its toll on the populace. Over 1 million men were called up for military service in a campaign against Korea, for example. It was only 4 decades until the Sui dynasty was overthrown. The victor of this rebellion was a man named Li Yuan, a cousin of the second Sui emperor, who founded the Tang dynasty, Tang Chao, in 618.
Tang dynasty we're up to. Yeah, good night, Ninty Gold. Catch the VOD tomorrow, of course you can. Just gonna cut it up a little bit so it's a nicer VOD. Hopefully it'll actually work. YouTube sometimes plays fair. So yeah, you can catch that tomorrow. But nice, thank you for joining. So we're into the Tang dynasty now, so we're getting a little bit closer now. And the Tang was the dynasty. I've got a note that says, look out for Tang dynasty, Shenhua's parents, Li Yuang. So let's see if I can remember why I wrote that down.
And would rule as Emperor Gaozu before abdicating to his son, who ruled as Emperor Tang Taizong, and so started China's golden age. The Sui dynasty had started
a proper dragon mirror on his
examination
chest
system based on the Confucian classics. The Tang expanded on this, setting up schools, issuing state versions of the Confucian classics, complete with commentaries. China now had a political system based more on merit rather than hereditary privilege, apart from the position of emperor. The Tang capital at Chang'an was very cosmopolitan. The city and its suburbs had around 2 million inhabitants, the biggest city in the world at the time. China's 3 religions of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism thrived in Tang times. Chang'an had hundreds of monasteries, temples, and some foreign churches. One of the most famous art forms to come out of Tang times was poetry. 2 of the most famous Chinese poets, Li Bai and Du Fu, lived during Tang times. Li Bai is known for his romanticism and drunken descriptions of the moon, while Du Fu was a realist poet who described the realities of the time. During Tang times, tea also went from being a medicinal tonic to the single most popular drink in China. This popularization was facilitated by Lu Yu, who wrote the Cha Jing, or Classic of Tea. He would later be known as Cha Sheng, the Sage of Tea. But nothing lasts forever. Eventually, the Tang dynasty degenerated into local warlords battling for power, and in 960 AD was replaced by the Song dynasty, Song Chao.
Song dynasty.
Although the Song dynasty started off strong with rapid economic development.
That was that sort of tapestry picture we looked at towards the end of the last law stream. Is one of the
Song
10 imperial treasures thing, I think that was. It's pretty cool. Hey Dalvik, haven't browsed the forum in a while. Is there a reason why there's no topics on the dragon? Okay, yeah. Matt's got you covered there.
The dynasty started off strong with rapid economic development. It was militarily weak and could not exert the same dominance in Asia as the Han and Tang dynasties did. In the year 1126, the Song capital Kaifeng was attacked by Jurchens from the north. The emperor and 3,000 members of the imperial family were captured and taken north. After Chinese forces regrouped further south, the emperor's youngest son was proclaimed the new emperor in Hangzhou. After losing the north, the dynasty lasted a further century and a half. Yet on a cultural level, the Song dynasty still flourished. Policies were less restrictive, markets in cities could open at night, tea houses sprung up, and there were storytellers, puppet shows, and poets writing in the new Song dynasty style. Song.
This reminded me of that little puppet thing we watched at the end of last stream. The Wulang Power Rangers, wherever they were.
The Song dynasty is known for its landscape paintings, or Shanshui Hua. Northern Song works often were huge, grand scenes. After the loss of the north, paintings were smaller, leaving large expanses of canvas empty, which scholars generally believe to represent the loss of the Chinese heartland and the feeling of emptiness that abounded after the Northern Song's defeat. The Southern Song scholars viewed protecting Confucian values as protecting the essence of Chinese culture. In Song times, one of the most important commentaries on the Confucian classics was published by the scholar Zhu Xi. This would later become the commentary on which all subsequent civil service examinations were based, up until the end of the civil service examination system in 1905.
Ooh, we're getting there, 1905.
Even at the beginning of the Song dynasty, there was already a foreign state existing on territory to the north which had once been part of China. This was the Liao dynasty, Liao Chao, formed by the Khitan people around the fall of the Tang dynasty. It lasted from 907 to 1125 AD. Not only did the Liao dynasty have a Chinese name, but also took on the Chinese imperial hereditary system, in contrast to the Khitan way of electing the chief of the clan. This dynasty started a trend of foreign rule that would eventually unite the whole of China under the Mongols.
Mongolian horseback riders ran. I love how I try and like connect every little detail to something.
After the Liao was the Jin dynasty, Jin Chao, also
Jin
called
dynasty.
Da Jin or Great Jin. This was the dynasty which defeated the Northern Song and pushed the Song imperial court south. It was founded by the Jurchen people whose descendants were the Manchus that later founded the Qing dynasty. The Jurchens first defeated the Liao and then turned on the Song, having incorporated Chinese military experts into their army from defeated Chinese cities. They laid siege to Kaifeng, the Song capital. The city was defended by 48,000 troops with crossbows and flamethrowers. Yes, the Chinese had figured out gunpowder by this time, and although they didn't use it to make guns like in the West, there were a wide variety of Chinese weapons that used fire. The Jurchens brought 30 catapults to launch huge stones towards the city, iron sheeting to bridge the moat, and siege towers higher than the city walls, from which they threw bombs down into the city. And so, the Song capital fell. The Jin dynasty ruled over around 40 million people in North China and adopted many of the institutions of Chinese government. As the dynasty went on, the Jurchens started adopting more and more Chinese customs, such as language, dress, and rituals. Although this was disrupted after an assassination of the emperor by Jurchen officials protesting the assimilation to Chinese culture, by the end of the dynasty, most Jurchens did indeed speak Chinese, wear Chinese clothes, adopt Chinese names, and many even married with the local population. In the late 12th century, there arose another contender for the rule of all China, the Mongolian ruler Genghis Khan. Although the Mongol conquest of the Song started after Genghis Khan's death, Genghis Khan started what would become the largest contiguous land empire in history.
Stretching all the way from Korea to Eastern Europe. The Emperor of the Great Khan. China. Tibet there. Mongolia.
Stretching all the way from Korea to Eastern Europe.
Japan Sea.
It was Genghis's grandson, Kublai, who led the conquest of the Song. The Jin dynasty had already been defeated, and in the year 1271, Kublai moved his capital from Mongolia to Beijing, which at that time was called Dadu. This year marks the start of the Yuan dynasty, Yuan Chao. Like the Liao and the Jin, the foreign invaders adopted a Chinese name for their empire. The conquest of the south took some time, however. The Mongols had to build a fleet of boats, engaged in a 5-year siege of the city of Xiangyang in the Yangtze Valley, and after crossing the Yangtze in 1275, the Song Empress Dowager managed to summon a force of 200,000 to fight the Mongols.
Who's
But
counting?
the Mongols were a fearsome enemy, and after
These
slaughtering the entire
numbers.
population of the city of Changzhou, the Song Empress surrendered. The Mongols finally defeated the last Song loyalists in a naval battle in the year 1279. Under Yuan rule, Chinese were allowed to maintain most of their customs and religious
This
practices.
dude's eyebrows?
Although the Italian explorer Marco Polo noted that there was a lot of ethnic tension in China at the time. Different races were subject to different taxation laws and were placed in a hierarchy. For example, a Chinese would be subject to severe penalties for fighting against Mongols, but a Mongol could get off with a mere fine if he killed a Chinese. Chinese were also forbidden from owning weapons. But at this time, China was considered the center of the world. Chinese culture was superior, and the emperor the son of heaven. The Yuan emperors kept Chinese advisors and reinstated the imperial examination system in 1315, although they did have quotas to make sure ethnic Chinese, especially citizens of the former Song, were outnumbered by Mongols and other races in the government. Since China was now tied to a Eurasian empire, more Europeans than ever before visited China, and Chinese culture and inventions such as printing and gunpowder spread west. Before long, Europeans with some knowledge of the exotic lands and cultures of the East would start their own age of exploration, something which ethnic Chinese at the time, and in the centuries to come, were not too pleased about. You
think his mother did that, Rhino? I can't imagine he's ironed it that crisp. He had it straight out of a packet.
1368, China was finally under the rule of an ethnic Chinese ruler again, and the Ming Dynasty, or
Ming Dynasty,
was founded. Emperor Taizu had started off as a commoner, living in
Christian
poverty
side.
as a youth. His parents had died when he was 16. He spent time in a Buddhist temple before joining a rebel group he would later come to lead. He first took Nanjing, and then took his army right to the Mongol capital at Beijing. The Mongol ruler fled, and Taizu established his dynasty. Taizu proved to be a very harsh ruler, conducting several purges of the elite and literati. However, the imperial examination system continued, testing students' knowledge of the four books Confucius Analects, Mencius, the Doctrine of the Mean, and the Great Learning, as interpreted in the commentary of the scholar Zhu Xi. The Ming Dynasty saw an explosion in publishing and vernacular literature.
Dynasty.
Blue and white Ming porcelain became a hot commodity in Europe. In the religious sphere, out of China's three religions, early Ming emperors favored Taoism, and Taizu outlawed Christianity. However, later on, a wave of Jesuit missionaries brought knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and geography to China, the most famous of which was Matteo Ricci, who lived in Beijing from 1601 to 1610. Control of China's borders proved troublesome for the Ming emperors. The Great Wall you see today was built in Ming times to keep the Mongols out. China's coasts faced threats from smugglers and pirates. China's naval power increased substantially during the Ming. The explorer Zheng He was dispatched by the emperor to go on several voyages looking for tribute states for the Ming Empire. Zheng He got as far as the coast of East Africa. Despite the Chinese distrust of foreigners, many Western powers had become major maritime forces in Asia, and international trade with these foreign powers flourished, although the Ming always regarded the foreign powers as mere tribute states and limited them to trading posts without access to the Chinese interior. But by the 1600s, despite positive economic growth, the Ming government had grown too large and expensive. A drop in temperatures during this time led to a shorter growing season and a famine between the years of 1627 and 28. Gangs started ravaging the countryside, and the state didn't have the financial resources to react. The Ming started having trade problems with the Japanese and the Spanish, which shut down major flows of silver into China, leading to further fiscal problems. As Ming society started to break down, different factions fought for power. The Ming's mandate of heaven had expired. In 1644, the warlord Li Zicheng marched on Beijing, and the Ming emperor committed suicide.
Yikes.
But Li's rule of China hardly lasted. The Manchus, who had been building up their state and armies outside the Great Wall, marched on China. A Ming general named Wu Sangui, who was tasked with guarding a Great Wall outpost, sided with the Manchus against Li and his rebels. So started the Qing dynasty.
Here we go.
Qingchao.
This is the one that we're going to be most familiar with from Shenmue. The revival of the Qing dynasty. Qing. How was he pronouncing it?
So started the Qing dynasty.
Qing.
Qingchao,
Okay.
also called Da Qing, another period of alien rule for China, but a period that brought wealth, stability, and territorial expansion, at least until China was weakened by foreign powers in the 1800s. In 1645, the Qing rulers ordered all men in the empire to adopt the Manchu hairstyle. they had to get a haircut and start growing what was called a queue within 10 days or face death. This was to show their loyalty to the new dynasty. Most Chinese saw no option but to obey. It took several decades for the Qing to track down and crush the last Ming loyalists. Once Emperor Kangxi took power in 1669, China entered a period of stability that lasted 130 years and saw only 3 emperors
on the throne within the Qing dynasty. So technically then, the emperor at the time of that Shenhua's mother and father flashback doesn't necessarily have to be the last emperor. If there was 3 emperors within this dynasty that's been spoken about, because it lasted from like 1600 something.
Kangxi and his grandson Qianlong each ruled for over 60 years. Kangxi embraced Chinese culture, continuing the imperial examination system, allowing ethnic Chinese to have a place in the government, and ordering the completion of the Kangxi Dictionary of Chinese Characters. Kangxi also welcomed Jesuit missionaries to the court, appointing them to the Imperial Board of Astronomy. After the short reign of Kangxi's son Yongzheng, the Emperor Qianlong took over, starting another 60-year reign. Qianlong was a patron of the arts. In addition to studying and painting himself, he also amassed a huge collection of Chinese artwork at the palace. He added his own poems and calligraphy to many paintings. During this time, China's territory expanded to include the whole of Tibet, Xinjiang in the west, Mongolia, and the island of Taiwan.
That's the
a Dutch colonial
chapter 11 place.
In the Qing period, Confucianism became
Let's go back
previously a Dutch colonial. Xinjiang in the west,
Xinjiang
Mongolia,
and the
and
rest.
the island of Taiwan, previously a Dutch colonial outpost. In the Qing period, Confucianism became more strict. Scholar officials feared a similar unraveling of society that happened in the late Ming. But threats to Chinese society came from the outside as well as from within. The Chinese had previously limited Western trade only to certain ports and limited Westerners' access to the interior of the country, regarding the Western powers as mere tribute states. In 1793, the British sent Lord Macartney to meet with the Emperor Qianlong. Macartney came with gifts of scientific instruments, carpets, knives, glass objects, all meant to arouse Chinese interest in British manufactured goods.
This was before the invention of Tim Hortons donuts.
Proclaiming in a letter to the King of England, "We possess all things. I have no use for your country's manufactures." By the year 1800, the British were purchasing about 1/7 of the tea produced in China and paying for their tea using silver. This contributed about 1/10 of state revenue through the tax they paid on tea. However, since China refused to buy British goods, this led to a massive trade imbalance. British silver flowed into China and never came back. The British needed a product to balance out the relationship. This product came in the form of opium. The British East India Company transported opium from India to China, then brought tea from China back to Britain. The Qing court understood the perils of opium addiction and sought to outlaw the substance, but this led to further confrontation with the British, who possessed superior naval forces, and thus the so-called Opium Wars led to several unfair treaties between the Qing dynasty and the British. The Qing were forced to open up more ports to British trade. They ceded the island of Hong Kong for the British to use as a colony, and the opium trade went on unaffected. Other European powers, such as the French and the Germans, as well as the Russians
smuggled
and Japanese,
drugs across to
also
China
succeeded in occupying parts of Chinese territory
because we wanted
and
a cup
forcing
of tea.
the Chinese to open up more ports for trade. The 1800s also saw several rebellions internally, the largest of which was the Taiping Rebellion. Faced with intrusion by Western powers and rebellions from within, the Qing decided to try to use some aspects of Western learning to strengthen the dynasty. The self-strengthening movement, or Ziqiang Yundong, was started. China started to industrialize, build Western weapons and warships, railroads, factories, and promote study of Western science and mathematics. Yet this movement was ultimately unsuccessful. During a battle with the French in Vietnam in the 1880s, it took the French only an hour to destroy an entire fleet of new Chinese ships. By the end of the 1800s, Qing China had been utterly humiliated. Losing a war with Japan over Korea, they were forced to hand over Taiwan and Liaodong to the Japanese. This started a frenzy of other countries seizing territory for themselves in China. It was almost looking like China was going to be carved up by Western powers the same way Africa was. In 1900, the Boxer Rebellion prompted a force of 20,000 Allied soldiers from the Western powers to march from Tianjin to Beijing and put down the rebellion and then loot the city. The Qing were ordered to pay twice the government's annual revenue as repatriation to the Western powers. Amazingly, the Qing managed to hold on to power into the beginning of the 20th century. But change was inevitable. In 1905, the centuries-old system of imperial service examinations was abolished, and a modern Western-style school system was set up. In 1912, the last Qing emperor abdicated, and China entered.
This is the guy. Puyi. 1908. 4 years old or whatever.
The modern era. An era that, despite a hopeful start, would lead to the worst destruction of traditional Chinese culture and the largest loss of Chinese life in history. Scholars today look back on the imperial examination system based on Confucian values as one of the most advanced political systems in history. Some even feel bringing back aspects of Confucian learning would be essential to reinvigorating Chinese culture and reversing negative trends in modern Chinese society. If you stuck with this video all the way to the end, you must be a true scholar of Chinese history. A lot can be learned from China's 5,000 years of traditional culture. Many of the profound principles of Chinese philosophy could make our societies better today, and the written records are just sitting there, waiting to be discovered. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.
There you go, guys. We are all true scholars of China. So, let's get back into some Shenmue stuff now. So, the next thing I wanted to do is we attempt to learn a little bit about the Emperor. So, we've just reached the Qing Dynasty here now, where we're obviously going to try and get some information on Emperor Puyi. It's like the last Emperor. But, again, for context, it wouldn't be right without actually checking out those envoy scenes from Shenmue 3. So we're going to go to 3 hours, 5 minutes, 20. We're going to get past the photograph of the pig. It's on the other side, the pig. Right, here we go. So this is a photograph of the Emperor's envoy.
The Verdant Bridge? It must be pretty old.
So this dude here is apparently the envoy. And the envoy is a messenger or representative, especially one of a diplomatic or on a diplomatic mission. I don't think I've got anything else to go with that, but I'm just seeing if his clothing looks similar to Shenhua's father, but...
What the?
He's also got a little beard, I think. I think I mentioned this before. Has he got like a little Yuan Dazu beard? Like it could be a young Yuan Dazu. Do you know what I mean? Beardy thing going on.
Who exactly are these people?
So sorry to have kept you waiting. Have you found anything of interest?
This photo here.
Ah, yes, that photo is said to be of an imperial envoy dispatched to Bailu village by the Emperor himself.
What are these crests on these banners?
They represented the will of the imperial family. A dragon for the Emperor, and a phoenix for the Empress. It is said that the emperor of the time revered the dragon and phoenix greatly.
Why was this imperial envoy visiting Bailu village?
I'm afraid that is all I know.
Would you mind if I borrowed the photo?
Oh.
That's all she knows. If only she knew a little bit more.
Show a bit of faith in Iwao-san.
Iwao.
Please take it.
Thank you.
Take this. I cannot read what
Right,
it
we got
says,
there.
but I hope that it brings you
Ema
some
from
comfort.
Iwao to his mother. Unrelated. We should have the cutscene with Shenhua. Hopefully. Here we go.
This is the Verdant Bridge.
So 1912, yeah?
1910, the second
1910. The second year of Xuantong, that was the year it was finished. What is Xuantong? That was something we, or I wanted to actually try and work out what was going on there. What's that actually mean? Xuantong. So it's a link to Puyi, the Xuantong Emperor. So he's actually known as the Xuantong Emperor. Better known by his personal name, Puyi. Was the last emperor. Okay, so what does Shenhua say? The second year of Xuantong. So, was that his reign then? So that is, so they literally are, no mistake, that is this emperor. Is that his date of birth? 1906. 1910, the second year of Xuantong. So was he only 2 when he started? I guess we'll get into this in a moment when I watch that other video. Yeah, he became the emperor at the age of 2 in 1908, but was forced to abdicate at the age of 6 in 1912 during the Xinhai Revolution. His era name as Qing Emperor Xuantong means proclamation of unity. So the bridge was finished when he was only 4, right? Yeah, 4. And obviously if that's on the back of the photograph, then whatever is depicted in the photograph is that caption, right? So the envoy's there, so they've already come to get or to give Misty One's grandfather's the mirror plans. So this is happening in 1910.
This is the Verdant Bridge. (1910), the second year of Xuantong. That's the year it was finished.
It's pretty old then. The resident monk said it was built for an imperial envoy that visited Bailu. Look at the flag and the mirror.
These patterns match what we saw in my father's quarry. This might help us find him.
Is there anyone who might know more about the bridge?
Elder Yep probably would.
Who?
The elderly lady who makes medicine for the village. She lives near the village square.
Perfect. I'll go see her tomorrow.
Thanks.
Come in. What is it now, eh?
I have a question for you.
You and everyone else. None of you would know anything if not for me. Go on.
Tell me about the completion of the Verdant Bridge.
Verdant Bridge?
Is there anything you can tell me? Anything at all would help.
I don't get asked about it every day. But you look like the insistent type, so I'll tell you.
This was a good character, wasn't it? Quite a nice bloke.
I was just a boy, mind you, but I recall that an Imperial envoy was to come to the village. The bridge was built by the villagers as a way to welcome him.
It was?
Yes. The bridge you see today was built for the envoy's arrival.
Who is the envoy?
I remember it vividly. It was a hot summer's day, and the envoy's clothing was quite ostentatious.
Do we see? That's all we're seeing of his clothing. Wondering if I can make a mental image when we look at the fashion. Although it has to be Qing Dynasty. What do you reckon are in these boxes?
Why did the envoy come to Bailu?
Is that them leaving or arriving? Because they could have a box per mirror.
Summer's day, and the envoy's clothing was quite ostentatious.
Though there are only 2 holding boxes, but yeah, you could be right, Matt. Does look like arriving. Yeah, it is arriving, isn't it? Because they're all standing around watching them arrive.
The envoy's clothing was quite ostentatious.
So you're probably right, Matt. They're probably all just gifts.
Why did the envoy come to Bailu?
I don't know.
Nothing?
Like I said, I was just a kid.
It's a shame we didn't get more answers here.
Who might know more about it?
Well, let me think.
Sun. We have got Sun.
Pretty sure
We've also got, I can't remember why, but I put Shenhua Talk
These days,
3112.
he hangs around.
With Feng?
Yeah. I think I need to go to the abandoned temple.
Why? Is there something there?
Someone, actually. Grandmaster Feng says that's where Sun is. He also said Sun has seen the people from the photograph in person.
The people in this photo are Imperial envoys sent from the capital.
Exactly. If we figure out the link between the patterns on the bridge and the patterns on the mirrors, I think it will lead us straight to your father.
I can only hope.
I know. We'll find him, Shenhua. Where's the abandoned temple?
The
3810. I think this is the last. Oh no, there's an LDR one as well. So there's 2 more of these.
Please, tell me about the completion of the Verdant Bridge.
The Verdant Bridge. I must have been 10 or so. They sent an Imperial envoy here, to Bailu. We built the bridge to welcome the Imperial envoy.
Wish we could get a closer look at some of these character models.
I remember waiting near the bridge with Ye and Su to catch the envoy's arrival. We had to shove our way to the front, but what I saw was etched into my memory. Our way to the front, but what I saw was etched into my memory.
It's crazy they had to make all of these models just for this hazy cutscene. Because none of these models technically are gonna, unless they just reused like some models in different clothing. Yeah, you can't really see what's going on with the box there. There does look to be a, you know what I mean, like a mirror crest on the top of the box. Potentially, like a dragon. Maybe the box has got a phoenix on.
To my memory.
He doesn't really say too much, does he, actually?
Why was the envoy sent to Bailu?
That's the question, isn't it? For a phantom river stone mirror.
What does a mirror have to do with this?
That envoy was on a mission to get a mirror made by the greatest stonemason in China. They came by decree of the Emperor.
And who was the stonemason?
His name was Yuan Liushan, and he stood above the rest. He lived in Bailu. He was Yuan's grandfather.
I see. So that's the connection.
What's the connection, you know? Still not really a connection, is it? It's just so happens to be Shenhua's stepfather's granddad that made it. It doesn't really connect to anything that I can think of beyond that. What, like Mr. Yuan himself carving the mirrors in the stone pit? Last one, Aldeyer, 5 hours 11 minutes for some reason. Yeah, it's got some sort of a crest engraving on.
Elder, yeah.
If it isn't Shenhua.
Shenhua.
And the young man from Japan. Come to ask about the Verdant Bridge again?
We have.
And as I've told you, it's ancient history.
Why is she so protective about it?
To do with you.
Or does it?
The Phoenix Mirror. How did you get this?
My father left it for me. It's what brought me to this village.
Tell us about the Verdant Bridge, please.
Su and Sun both told us you would know more.
Ah, so you've spoken to...
She doesn't know anything else though, does she? From memory.
It was over 70 years ago now. 1910, the second year of the Shren Tong Emperor, and I was but a girl. An imperial envoy was sent from the capital to the village.
Like we already kind of know this stuff.
The whole village came together and built a new bridge so as to welcome him.
And that's the Verdant Bridge.
We knew.
It was a hot summer afternoon. Su Swan and I were trying to get a glimpse of the envoy and his troop. We could hardly contain ourselves as we waited near the bridge. At last,
That's a good shot of him, actually. Well, better shot. He's got a red hat. He's got a yellow hat.
They were
Just pointing that out.
I can still picture them clear as day. The envoy came to command the greatest stonemason to make a set of mirrors of phantom river stone.
And who was that?
Shenhua's grandfather. We know this stuff.
Well, phantom river stone can only be found here in Bailu. And of the stonemasons here, the Yuan name became known to the capital.
See you later, Minnie.
They were the family that was chosen to make the special mirrors for the Emperor. The envoy gave the design for the mirrors, to Yuren's grandfather.
That must have been the mirror design we found at the house.
Which matches the pattern in the photo that we found at Mount Yuan Temple.
And the relief we found at the quarry.
This pattern is everywhere.
Listen carefully.
Go up the bell tower.
Find the 6
Yeah, so she doesn't really know anything then, does she?
The bell tower.
The bell tower?
Is that it? Yeah, it's like you say, Matt, it's all very, very vague. Considering she was there, she was the oldest. She's like kind of the big build up to her and her story, and then she just sort of reiterating what everyone else has said. So we're still really none the wiser. But we have got this documentary now that we're going to watch on Emperor Puyi. I think we're going to be going over today. Again, I was worried we wouldn't have enough stuff to cover, but unintentionally padded this out. But let's go for it. Let's get stuck in. This is on the channel History of China.
On the 17th of October, 1967...
We may not need to watch the whole thing. It depends how deep they get into this Puyi guy, but this is the Xuantong Emperor that we've just learnt about. We kind of already knew about if you've watched previous lore streams, but hopefully we'll get a little bit more information on this dude now.
A man lay dying of kidney cancer at the anti-imperialist...
Gives you a little bit more when you find the scroll.
People's Republic of China.
Yeah, but just sort of like, these are the imperial treasures and go to Niaowu or whatever.
The events of his lifetime. His
You've got a map to the treasure or some bollocks.
And he was the last emperor of China.
The last emperor of China.
November 1908. Twilight.
I thought, by the way, because obviously we can't watch the film The Last Emperor, because that would definitely get copyright striked, but I thought that perhaps this we get away with watching this and it should sort of sum up the story all the same.
Dynasty. The 72-year-old Empress Dowager Cixi is dying. This woman, nicknamed the Dragon
fingernails,
Lady, has been the true master of Imperial China for the last 47 years, thanks to the strategic use of child emperors as puppets. The latest of them, her nephew Emperor Guangxu, was crowned in 1875 at 3 years old. As he grew up, he however aimed to massively reform the conservative empire. Empress Dowager Cixi, opposed to these changes and wishing to stay in power, staged a coup, placing Emperor Guangxu under house arrest, and continued to rule the nation in his stead with an iron fist. In November 1908, aware of her imminent death, she organized the assassination of Emperor Guangxu to prevent him from reclaiming power. The emperor, however, did not have a son. As there was no heir presumptive, a new son of heaven had to be selected. Once again...
There's your chapter 10? Where Rio's looking down the stairs. I might pop this a little bit quicker, guys. Only like 125, just because he's talking a little bit slow.
Cixi planned to choose another child. A perfect candidate was available, 2-year-old Puyi. The boy was the son of Daifang, Prince Chun, who had inherited this title from his late father, Yixuan, a fervent supporter and ally of Cixi, and father of late Emperor Guangxu.
Imagine being an emperor that young. You wouldn't have a clue what's going on at all, would you? That's cool.
Yuan himself was a son of Emperor Daoguang, which legitimized Puyi's imperial bloodline. Furthermore, Puyi's mother, Youlan, was the daughter of Zhonglu, a high-ranking Qing official who had been Cixi's champion and rumored lover. The night before poisoned Emperor Guangxu died, Cixi dispatched a procession of eunuchs and imperial guards from the Forbidden City to Daifang's residence to collect his son, little Puyi. Upon learning that their eldest son was adopted into the Forbidden City, Daifang and his wife Youlan were shocked, but powerless to protest the imperial decision. Since the child was only 2 years old, his wet nurse was permitted to come along to the Forbidden City. At dawn, the procession had returned to the palace. Pu Yi was taken to see the Empress Dowager, who he later recalled as a hideous figure. She died the following day, on the 15th of November 1908. As the infant's coronation was prepared, several figures received new titles for the new era. Cexi's niece, Jingfan, the wife of late Emperor Guangxu, became the new Empress Dowager, Longyu. Zaifeng, Pu Yi's father, was appointed as a regent for his son. They would together take the reins of the Qing dynasty. On the 2nd of December 1908, Pu Yi was crowned as Emperor Xuantong in an immense traditional ceremony of the Qing dynasty at the age of 2 years old.
I think this is the film footage
in the history of China. The boy was said to have been very distraught by the racket of the ceremony and cried during the whole event. Nonetheless, Pu Yi was now the son of heaven. As such, he would be pampered and spoiled by eunuchs and palace maids during his early childhood. However, he was separated from his mother, Youlan, since following the Qing imperial tradition, all former imperial concubines, including Empress Dowager Longyu, had become Pu Yi's symbolic mothers. As he grew up, he was forced to visit them regularly, and reportedly despised them. In addition to Longyu leading the imperial harem, there were 5 other concubines of past emperors, whose titles were at the time Imperial Noble Consort Qi, concubine of late Emperor Xianfeng, Imperial Noble Consort Xun, Imperial Noble Consort Yu, and Noble Consort Jin, concubines of Emperor Tongzhi, and
so none of these.
Finally,
there's one more.
Noble Consort Jin.
I'm trying to look at a date that could be one of the envoy people. If these are sort of, what's a consort? Is that like someone that works under the emperor? This guy could be the envoy, maybe. If he was born, does that mean born? 1873, so he would be 30. Like 38, maybe. Getting on.
Emperor Guangxu. In 1910, as he was 4 years old, Pu Yi's formal education began. 2 tutors were appointed to teach.
A wife, husband, or companion, in particular spouse. What is a consort? But there was 5 of them. Companion, could it be an envoy?
Pu Yi's formal education began. 2 tutors were appointed to teach him the Confucian classics, Chen Baochen and Lu Junxiang, prominent scholars of the times. The child emperor's younger brother, Pu Jie, although living at their father's residence house, would later be taken to the Forbidden City to partake in these lessons and would also become Pu Yi's playmate. As a child emperor, Pu Yi received
Emperor can have as many wives as he likes.
And rapidly
Okay.
became spoiled. He developed sadistic tendencies, frequently ordering eunuchs to be flogged or punished for minor or no real offences. Reportedly, he would only obey his wet nurse, who by now had essentially replaced his mother. Meanwhile, the government of the empire was in crisis. Since the 19th century, the Qing dynasty had become more and more unpopular in the eyes of the Chinese people. Many secret societies aimed to overthrow it. Some wished to...
Yeah, the footage that we were showing a little bit earlier, that is based on, or that's directly taken from the film called The Last Emperor. There's an actual movie that you can get. Yeah, and there's some documentary footage.
Restore a Han Chinese empire, although many, inspired by the West, wanted a republic. A plot to assassinate Regent Zaifeng was exposed, and many failed uprisings arose everywhere. Zaifeng had no real government skills. Furthermore, he had been persuaded by members of his close family to appoint them to many positions of power they were not qualified for.
See, if you notice, these dudes with the hats, those are literally the same hats from the... I wonder if I can get that up again. So if I do that in a new tab, just get one of these envoy scenes up again.
Find the 6 tokens here, then climb the bell tower.
LDR was 5'11", 15, so it's like here-ish.
Together, and his true. We could hardly contain ourselves as we waited near the bridge. At last, they appeared.
I think they've kind of gone for some very basic outfits in this cutscene. But, I mean, the hat's quite spot on. He's got a red hat. I don't know why his is yellow, if that's like a colour thing. But this hat in particular, you can... I don't even know if this is authentic clothing, or is this just movie clothing?
In October 1911, an uprising of the Imperial Army in Wuchang...
Hang on a sec. Retro, off to bed now. Up at 5 AM for work. Oh, you're very welcome, mate. Thanks for joining, as per normal, per usual. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.
Succeeded. It gradually developed into the Shenhua Revolution. The revolutionary leaders, headed by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, advocated making China a republic and a modernized country, claiming the conservative Qing dynasty was obsolete. In the following weeks, they successfully captured more and more territory in the south of the empire. In the Forbidden City, although 5-year-old Emperor Puyi did not realize it, the overwhelmed Qing imperial court was in chaos, unable to handle the issue. They needed a natural leader and capable strategist. Subsequently,
and this dude here has got the beard of the envoy. Terry, the red hat is mainly used by the key members of the Qing government, like an MP in the UK. Oh, okay.
An old figure would re-emerge from the shadows.
What about the yellow hat? Have they got
master of the Beiyang army, the best drilled and modernized force of the empire, was called back into the picture. Yuan Shikai had been sentenced to exile by Regent Taifeng since he had betrayed his brother Emperor Guangxu during Cexi's coup in 1898. However, in the face of the current situation, Taifeng reluctantly agreed to have Yuan brought back to the imperial court. The general was appointed as Prime Minister of the Imperial Cabinet on the 16th of November and promised to crush the rebellion. 2 weeks later, Taifeng resigned from his position of regent. From then on, he would devote his attention to his family and stay away from politics, leaving...
I'm wondering if any of this is going to crop up again in the future, or is this literally the only sort of Emperor story that we're going to be getting
official power in
from this era?
Long Yu's hands. Yuan Shikai and his Beiyang army brought a drawback to the Xinhai Revolution. However, he had no loyalty to the empire and secretly started negotiating with the Republican rebels. In exchange for the position of president once the Republic would be established,
like, despite some
to organize the abdication of Emperor Puyi
people's like negativity of the story in Shenmue 3, they have sort of researched it to a point.
He pressured the court for permission to negotiate abdication terms. The imperial government, overwhelmed, agreed. The North-South Conference, settling the terms between the Empire and the rebels, took place on the 18th of December, 1911. In exchange for an official end to the Empire and founding of a republic in its stead, the Republicans agreed to let the imperial court stay in the Forbidden City.
So I'm wondering if in Shenmue, like, they've taken some liberties on how this stuff's gone down. So obviously they're saying here in like 1911, so this is like the year after the Verdant Bridge and the mirrors are made. You know, it's getting real, shit's getting real. This is going to be like the end of the Qing dynasty and dynasties forever and whatever, the last emperor and stuff. Maybe Shenmue has got it in a way that like it kicks off more, and like Shenhua's parents die, the mirrors get in the wrong hands, you know, Dragon and Phoenix are like going crazy and that sort of stuff. And then so many years later is when, you know, WoW and Xiao and Ming pick up the kind of the continuation of the story from that point onwards, and they come across the mirrors in their possessions.
Would continue functioning as usual with a staff of eunuchs and palace maids.
Because I'm guessing we're not going to be getting stuff on a dragon and phoenix mirror in this, so that's kind of like Shenmue's followed the outline of the emperor and his reign to a point, but then after that they've sort of like created a story that expands from this particular real life plot point, kind of.
And an annual stipend of 4 million taels of silver from the new government, which also agreed to protect and maintain the imperial tombs of the dynasty. The Qing court was devastated. However, these terms were better than expected. On the 12th of February 1912, Empress Dowager Longyu signed the official imperial edict of abdication.
I thought she was dead
the Emperor Xuan
already.
The Qing dynasty was no more.
What's it say? So yeah, that was the kind of the last day of the Qing dynasty.
Most Qing politicians and high officials began serving the Republic under its now president Yuan Shikai, or returned to civilian life. Besides some aristocratic families, very few remained loyal to the Qing.
You don't think, like, obviously Yuan is quite a common name, but you don't think they're going to sort of work stuff like this in. So we've learnt about Mr. Yuan's grandfather, but could Mr. Yuan's father be Shikai Yuan?
Besides some aristocratic families, very few remained loyal to the Qing. Trying to salvage the defunct monarchy's influence, some Manchu nobles founded the Royalist Party, essentially aiming to restore the Qing dynasty, which was secretly supported by the Japanese. It was headed by Shanqi, Prince Su, whose daughter would play a major role in Puyi's later life. But how did the deposed emperor react? For the child monarch, who was barely 6 years old, all these events didn't really change anything. No one informed him that China was now a republic, and since the Forbidden City itself kept operating as usual, he was still revered as the Son of Heaven and received a classical Confucian education by his tutors. In February 1913, Empress Dowager Longyu died at the age of 45 years old.
Okay, now she's died.
President Yuan Shikai then came to the Forbidden City to pay his respects. In reality, the power-hungry general had other ambitions. He was aiming to restore a modern Han Chinese monarchy, which he would control as a new emperor. In parallel, Child Puyi slowly came to understand that this man who in the past kowtowed before him now held more authority than him. He commanded soldiers, and everyone obeyed him. The deposed
Did they actually
emperor
film this at the
realized he was
Forbidden
no
City
longer
then?
the head of state,
Looks like it.
and that China was now a republic. Puyi reportedly despised Yuan Shikai, branding him as a traitor. In late 1915, Yuan's preparations were complete, and he declared the founding of the Empire of China. This turned out to be a severe miscalculation, as the elite had had enough of monarchy. In the face of his allies abandoning him, and overwhelmingly negative popular sentiment, he had no choice but to abdicate after only 84 days, and died shortly after, in early 1916. With no strong central government left, the country descended into anarchy. In every province, local generals began acting independently, forming competing cliques that vied for control of Beijing to claim the presidency. The warlord era had begun.
A lot of clicks
there. In the
there.
heart of the nation's capital city, the imperial court nervously observed the chaos from within the walls of the Forbidden City. In mid-1917, a peculiar general would enter the picture, Zhang Xun. General Zhang was a Qing loyalist who had always refused to cut his queue after the Xinhai Revolution,
so this is the stuff with the hair now.
Dynasty. He further forbade his soldiers to do so as well. Taking advantage of yet another period of political chaos in Beijing, Zhang Xun seized the capital on the 1st of July and proclaimed the restoration of the Qing dynasty. An edict bringing back 11-year-old Puyi to the throne was immediately published, and within a few days, the dragon flag was once again flying everywhere in Beijing.
Dragon flags, guys.
The new imperial cabinet, headed by Zhang Xun, was formed, and it seemed as if the Qing dynasty
The revival
was
of the
truly emerging once
Qing
more.
dynasty.
However, besides the capital, the Qing loyalists had no power whatsoever. Duan Qirui, the ousted premier of the Republic, ordered a plane of the emerging Chinese Air Force to bomb the Forbidden City in a show of force. This terrorized the imperial court and killed an unfortunate eunuch. Duan Qirui then rallied his troops, and on the 12th of July, an all-out attack on Beijing was launched by the Republican forces. As a result, Zhang Xun fled, and the imperial court surrendered. The brief 2-week-long Manchu restoration was over. Back in Republican hands, the government of China declared war on the Central Powers, joining the Allies in World War I. However, at the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, settling
wonder if
the
they're going to
war,
be doing...
the Central Powers' concessions in China were not returned to the nation, but instead granted to Japan. The Empire of Japan
Like the mirrors...
already controlled...
The mirrors are like... What did Mr. Yuan Dezu say? Like, the mirrors, when combined, restore the Qing dynasty. I wonder if it's going to be like similar to this sort of thing where... I don't think he's still alive though.
Korea,
actually,
and Taiwan, and was constantly trying to increase
the
its
emperor.
Influence. As a result,
So they'd need to get
May the
a new
4th
emperor
movement
on the
broke out,
throne.
Nationwide massive student protest advocating Chinese nationalism and anti-imperialism. Cut off from all this chaos, 13-year-old Pu Yi would see his vision of the world rocked to the core as the Forbidden City received a new guest, Sir Reginald Fleming Johnston. Sir Johnston was a Scottish-born sinologist and British diplomat who had served in Hong Kong and British Weihai since 1898. The Republican government appointed him as another tutor for the teenage emperor, who would now receive Western education, in addition to Chen Baochen's Confucian teachings. Pu Yi and his teacher would rapidly grow fond of each other. The young monarch showed great focus and eagerness to learn English. Sir Johnston later recalled, "There are multitudes of English boys older than the emperor who cannot write English as well as he can after 12 days' study." The new tutor's presence brought considerable changes to the Forbidden City. He introduced his student to the telephone, and Pu Yi, developing a fascination for modern technology, was enchanted by this. He reportedly spent much time phoning strangers in Beijing randomly. The emperor also discovered cinema, and promptly ordered the installation of a projection room to enjoy films inside the Forbidden City, to the contempt of many in the court. As Pu Yi gradually grew short-sighted, Sir Reginald Johnston had him examined by a Western doctor, who recommended that he should wear spectacles.
You can't really fathom some of this stuff like actually happened within this modern era timeline.
Pu Yi's father, Zaifeng,
Like all of this emperor stuff feels like it's ages ago. And yet, you know, he's on the phone ringing strangers.
Emperor Yongzhang, who was Pu Yi's great-great-great-great-grandfather, was fond of spectacles brought to him by Jesuit missionaries and regularly wore them. Eventually, Sir Johnston was able to convince the imperial court of the medical importance of the issue. Its members reluctantly accepted that Pu Yi could wear glasses. He would depend on them for the rest of his life.
Were there any hidden numbers on the Shenmue phone? What you can... hidden dialogue with the Pu Yi.
He once unsuccessfully tried to contact people through his telephone to escape. An occasion to finally get out would present itself on the 30th of September 1921. It was, however, tragic.
Call Andy direct.
Pu Yi's biological mother.
Is this the Xuantong residence? Oops.
As she was dying, the emperor was allowed to visit her in his father Prince Chun's mansion to pay his respects.
Prince Chun mansion?
He had to return to the Forbidden City. In March 1922, when he was 16 years old, Pu Yi's life would be rocked once more. The now 4 remaining concubines of previous emperors, headed by Imperial Noble Consul Duan Kang, former Noble Consul Jin, decided it was time for him to be married. They subsequently began preparing the teenager's wedding. As the traditional concubine selection ceremony of the Qing dynasty could obviously no longer take place, the emperor was presented with photographs of young daughters of the defunct Qing dynasty's aristocracy. Puyi initially selected the daughter of a Mongol-bordered yellow banner family named Wenxiao. However, Wenxiao was only 12 years old and disapproved of for the title of empress by imperial noble consort Duankang. Puyi was therefore forced to reconsider. After more thinking, he eventually chose another girl. This was Wanrong, from the Manchu plain white.
All got those two long fingers, haven't they?
Puyi would however still marry Wenxiao as a secondary consort. A few months later, on the 21st of October 1922, the time for the actual wedding had come. The emperor would see
all
his
these banners as well
for the first time. During the whole day, the lavish imperial ceremony took place, with exchanges of gifts, banquets, and entertainment. By the evening, Puyi, his now empress, and his secondary consort entered the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, where their wedding night would take place. However, 16-year-old Puyi, who was reportedly very timid and probably homosexual, could not face the situation and ended up running away from the bridal chamber, leaving behind Wanrong and Wenxiao. Despite the incident, Puyi got along very well with his empress. Much like his own education under Sir Johnston, she had received a Western education from an American tutor, Miss Isabel Ingram. The imperial couple appreciated Western culture.
So there is still an emperor and empress, despite the dynasty not
As Puyi slowly grew up, he became more and more independent. The young monarch gradually began rejecting Qing tradition. For example, he cut his queue, one of the greatest symbols in the Manchu tradition, causing strong controversy within the court. He also came to understand the realities of a decaying forbidden city within the Republic of China. For the last few years, a great number of eunuchs serving the palace had been stealing jewels, works of art and luxury furniture to sell them on markets in Beijing.
This is what we read last stream, I think. They were stealing the imperial treasures and stuff.
However, during the night of the 27th of June 1923, eunuchs set fire to the Palace of Established Happiness, where many pieces were stored. They then claimed that all the objects lost had in fact been destroyed in the fire. For Puyi, this was one affront too many. Outraged about the lack of respect and corruption of his servants, the emperor ordered all remaining 1,100 eunuchs to be expelled and banned forever from the Forbidden City. The imperial court, however, reasoned him into letting a few dozen remain for maintenance and service, so that the Forbidden City could keep functioning. However, after this event, most of the Forbidden City fell into desolation. Apart from the main palaces and halls, most buildings were closed down. Weeds grew everywhere, as paint on the walls wore off.
It's crazy that stuff's happened,
groundbreaking event
and now it's like a tourist hotspot.
On the 1st of September 1923, the Empire of Japan was struck by the Great Kanto earthquake, a huge earthquake of magnitude 8 which claimed over 100,000 casualties in Tokyo and surrounding cities. The urban zones were devastated, and despite its prosperity, Japan needed aid. Puyi, advised by Johnston, who appreciated the Japanese system, decided to make vast donations for Japanese relief programs, which was greatly appreciated. Japanese delegates went to the Forbidden City the following month to personally thank the emperor on behalf of Japan. They reportedly rapidly understood that the young man would be easy to influence and manipulate in the future, and would keep a close eye on him from then on. In 1924, Literature Nobel Prize winner and prominent Bengali philosopher and composer Rabindranath Tagore visited China, giving lectures to young Chinese intellectuals. As he was curious about the Forbidden City, Puyi invited him for a visit, and they briefly exchanged.
The eviction.
The microcosm
At some point, I wonder if we'll get to that house that he actually moved to.
As I explained, Yuan Shikai's death in 1916 had plunged the nation into a state of constant civil war, which was still raging throughout China. On the 23rd of October 1924, when Puyi was 18 years old, warlord Feng Yuxiang seized Beijing in yet another coup. After having taken control of the government, he revoked the arrangement between the Republic of China and the Qing dynasty, allowing the imperial court to remain within the Forbidden City. On the 5th of November 1924, Feng Yuxiang's troops stormed the grounds and gave Pu Yi and his court 3 hours to pack up and leave. For the first time since its construction 504 years earlier, the Forbidden City became emperorless.
Hey, Sanosuke.
It would be turned into a museum the following year. The last 2 former concubines of past emperors still alive actually refused to go. They would finally be pushed out 2 weeks later. Pu Yi, his empress and concubine, and a few servants were now on the street without a plan. Initially, they relocated at the residence of Pu Yi's father, Taifeng, Prince Chun's mansion,
This is it.
his birthplace.
Prince Chun's mansion.
Children, Pu Yi could
Maybe
meet
that
his
is
other
that house
siblings
then.
and see his brother Pu Jie again. Sir Johnston parted ways with his student and returned to British service. Pu Yi would however not stay long alongside his father. Just a few days after having settled at Taifeng's residence, he was convinced by the Japanese to relocate the imperial court in exile to the Japanese legation in Beijing, as they guaranteed his protection there. He would celebrate his 19th birthday with the Japanese. This was however only a start. As they tried to gradually gain complete influence over Pu Yi, they persuaded him to relocate to another area where they would have even more control.
This house.
In February 1925, Pu Yi boarded a train from Beijing to Tianjin. In this
Wonder if that was that house.
many foreign
Just
would however not stay long alongside Taifeng, Prince Chun's mansion.
is that Prince Chun's mansion? I don't know. Without actually reading all this in detail, just
His birthplace.
maybe.
Since Taifeng had many children, Pu Yi could meet his other siblings and see his
Very
brother
mansion-esque.
again.
With
Sir
the
Johnston
fountain.
parted ways with his student and returned to British service. Pu Yi would however not stay long alongside his father. Just a few days after having settled at Taifeng's residence, he was convinced by the Japanese to
Taifeng's
relocate the
residence.
imperial
Yeah, I
court
think
in
that was the
exile
one.
to the Japanese legation in Beijing, as they guaranteed his protection there. He would celebrate his 19th birthday with the Japanese. This was however only a start. As they tried to gradually gain complete influence over Pu Yi,
Mad
they
that they've got
persuaded
like
him to
actual
relocate
video
to
footage of
another
him.
area where they would have even more control. In February 1925, Pu Yi boarded a train from Beijing to Tianjin. In this city, many foreign nations held concessions, areas in which the nation's laws were applied and where they were free to build. By relocating Pu Yi to its concession, the Empire
Yeah, he's
of
only
Japan had
19.
gained complete control over him. Worried about being identified and arrested during the trip, he dressed in civilian clothes and managed to avoid detection despite being surrounded by warlord troops in the train. The ex-emperor arrived safely in Tianjin and would soon be joined by his entourage. From this point on, a huge array of figures would visit him in Tianjin, including his former tutor Sir Reginald Johnston. Most visitors, however, came to ask for money. These ranged from princes of the imperial clan, prominent Qing aristocrats, former eunuchs, and even journalists.
I think he pays them off with the imperial treasures.
More significantly, warlords would also visit him, asking Pu Yi to finance their military campaigns and promising to restore him to the throne in exchange.
I'll catch you in the morning, yeah?
Master of the Fengtian clique, nicknamed the Old Marshal,
I'll speak to you in the morning anyway.
him in June 1925. He reportedly kowtowed to Pu Yi and flattered him to obtain large sums of money.
Was that right, Terry?
Zhang
Okay.
Zuolin would successfully capture Beijing the following year in yet another coup, but would never communicate with Pu Yi again. Zhang Zongchang, the dog-meat general, would also convince Pu Yi to give him large sums of money, followed by White Russian General Grigory Semyonov. None of them would deliver on their promises. In addition to these deceptions, an event of the Civil War would enrage and disgust Pu Yi and the Qing court more than anything. In 1928, bandit warlord Sun Jianying organized the looting of the eastern Qing tombs, where Emperor Qianlong, Empress Dowager Cexi, and other nobles from the Qing dynasty had been buried. Their coffins were desecrated, and many precious treasures were stolen. Pu Yi was shocked and demanded an intervention from the nationalists, who were technically in charge of Sun Tianying. Ultimately, nothing was done about the issue, and as a result, the former emperor completely broke ties with all Chinese authorities forever. As the struggle between warlords continued to shake China, Pu Yi was reportedly very bored in the Japanese concession of Tianjin. He developed an obsession with the Western way of life, entertaining himself by buying luxury products from the West, such as watches, fashionable clothes, radios, pianos, all while dreaming of restoration. At the same time, his marriage with Wanzhong slowly began to falter. The empress, who had a charming and extroverted character, constantly wanted to escape the monotony of the court in exile and go out to jazz clubs. She occasionally had violent arguments with her husband. Unable to leave and forced to attend interminable ceremonies, she felt completely trapped and hopeless. Eventually, Wanzhong fell into recreative opium consumption. Pu Yi, who had gradually stopped caring about her, did not react, even later stating that he found her more manageable when she took the drug.
It looks very suspect, doesn't it?
And who he had never really taken interest at all, was not treated any better. Feeling abandoned and disrespected, and thinking she was wasting her youth, she reportedly often cried and occasionally engaged in self-harm. By mid-1931, when Xiu decided to file for a divorce from the deposed emperor, greatly shocking the Qing court. Nonetheless, Pu Yi consented, and Wen Xiu was eventually granted the divorce, becoming the only concubine in the history of the Qing dynasty to do so. The gap she left at the court would not remain empty for long. The most unexpected person would soon begin regularly visiting Pu Yi in his residence. Shanqi, Prince Su, the Qing prince who had founded the unsuccessful royalist party after the Xinhai Revolution, had many daughters, who were therefore all members of the imperial clan. One of them, Jin Bihui, was adopted by a Japanese friend, Kawashima Naniwa. In reality, this man worked as a spy for the Japanese intelligence services. After taking in his friend's daughter, he named her Kawashima Yoshiko. She would have her be better remembered by her Chinese courtesy name, Dongzhen, Eastern Jewel. After having divorced from an arranged marriage with a young Mongolian aristocrat, she lived for several years in China, then Japan, with both male and female lovers. Eventually, Eastern Jewel encountered a prominent Japanese intelligence officer. Whether it be by patriotism or the thrill of adventure, she decided to gather information for him, eventually becoming a full-on spy for the Japanese. The Japanese still had close views on Pu Yi, and as Eastern Jewel was a member of the Qing imperial clan, she was the perfect candidate to go and watch and influence him. Pu Yi, respecting the rules of politeness and family, always welcomed her upon her visits to Tianjin. It was not long before he trusted her completely. In mid-September 1931, the Imperial Japanese Army, driven by imperialist views of expansion, conspired to justify war goals on China. During the night of the 18th of September, Japanese agents secretly blew up a section of the Japanese-owned South Manchuria Railway and then accused the Chinese of the event. The Imperial Japanese Army then flooded Manchuria with dozens of thousands of troops. Since the Republic of China was still in a state of civil war, now opposing the nationalists and the communists, it did not send troops to defend the region, and most local garrisons withdrew without fighting. Consequently, the Japanese successfully took control of all of Manchuria, a first step in their plan to gradually take over the whole of East Asia. Contrarily to Korea many years earlier, they could not annex the territory directly. They therefore decided to create a puppet state, which would be named Manzhouguo, or Manchukuo. A local would be placed at its head for a minimum of legitimacy. The perfect candidate was evident. Pu Yi, an ethnic Manchurian, had long expressed his wish to reclaim power and rule once more. He had been groomed by the Japanese since his eviction from the Forbidden City, and completely trusted them. General Doihara Kenji, head of the local Japanese army who had organized the Mukden incident and subsequent invasion of Manchuria, paid a visit to Puyi in Tianjin in early November 1931. He urged the deposed emperor to take the position, convincing him that this was the perfect opportunity to finally reclaim the throne and restore the imperial might of his ancestors. Most of the Qing court in exile, such as Puyi's old tutor Chen Baochen, but especially Empress Wanrong, realized that the Japanese were not to be trusted and desperately tried to convince Puyi to refuse. However, Japanese spy Eastern Jewel, who he trusted, was able to finally persuade him.
The Chinese Republic has broken every promise it ever made to me. Chinese troops desecrated the tombs of my ancestors. And Chinese troops did not defend Manchuria from the Japanese.
But Manchuria is still China.
I wonder if WoW did a similar thing then.
Manchuria is the richest frontier.
Like they trusted WoW being Japanese. They betrayed them.
Are going there every year. I'm going to build my country.
Puyi had made his choice. He was going to be emperor once more. Thank you for watching my video, I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please leave a like.
But did he? Obviously he didn't become emperor then, right?
Feel free to leave them in the
oh, there's a part 2. Oh god. 48 minutes, okay, we're not going to be watching that, guys. We got the gist of what's going on, I think, hopefully. Because we've already got over my allotted time, but I do want to quickly go through the clothing ranks whilst I'm here. I found a really cool website actually, which we're going to have a quick look at now. So this is going to be showing us some sort of samples of some of the stuff like the Emperor and Empress and that sort of stuff wore between the different dynasties. So traditional Chinese clothing and accessories. Traditional Chinese dress was not concerned with the form of the human body, but with the surface of the fabric itself. Most garments for both men and women were loose-fitting and simply constructed, but were richly ornamented with embroidered, woven, or appliqued designs. Colours and decoration were used to indicate the wearer's status, and clothes were often embellished with symbolic or seasonal motifs. There's a nice dragon depicted on there. The dragon robe, but that is a... What's the other bird thing I'm trying to think of there? It'll come to me while we're reading this probably. When the Manchus, tribesmen from across China's northern border, conquered China in 1644, establishing the Qing dynasty, they asserted authority over the indigenous Han Chinese population by creating a dress code. Regulations codified dress for the imperial family, the Qing court and government officials, and distinguished the ruling elite from the general population, although after 1800 the divisions in this dress code became progressively less clear. I wonder if we could have some Shenmue music on while I'm reading this quietly. Can you hear that okay? Just in the background a little bit. Unisex and unisize. Dragon robe. So dragon robes were the formal silk robes worn by the emperor, the imperial family and court for ceremonial functions. They were known as dragon robes because they were elaborately decorated with the imperial emblem of the 5-clawed dragon. Other symbols of authority and auspiciousness also adorned the robes. Look at that one. Dragon robe was worn by members of the imperial family and high-ranking court officials for semi-formal occasions and official businesses. The robe consisted of a full-length, side-fastening gown decorated with dragons among clouds and waves, worn belted with purses hanging from the belt. In the hierarchical society of Imperial China, dress was a way to designate an individual's rank, the exact status of both male and female members of the imperial family, and all of the officials could be recognised at a glance according to the colours and designs of their garments. So yeah, this is what Joe Kitchen was on about a while ago. So the emperor's always in this yellow. And then there's some ranks that go down. I think it's going to tell us now. So the yellow robe, decorated with a 5-clawed dragon, was reserved for the emperor, while apricot was worn by the crown prince, golden yellow by the emperor's sons, blue or brown by other imperial family members, and blue by lower ranking nobles and officials. And I think Shenhua's father is in blue. Blue or brown by other imperial family members, and blue by lower ranking nobles and officials. I think that might be what Joe Kitchen said. I think Shenhua's father comes under this rank. So he's sort of definitely something to do with the emperor, but he's not the emperor. Fine detail here. These just images. Oh, this is the different colours, right? Okay. So sorry, let's go back up a sec. So you've got the yellow, and then this is the apricot colour, who is the crown prince. And then that might be either a close-up of the apricot, or that could be the golden yellow. And then you've got the blue, which I think it said blue and brown were family members. That's very much reminiscent of Shenhua's father, I think. This could be the brownie sort of colour. That's definitely the brownie colour. Although they were supposed to wear the 4-clawed dragon, many officials used 5-clawed dragon motifs for their less formal robes. Yellow being the top rank is actually mad. Yeah, yellow was always the colour of the emperor in Chinese history. Confirmed by Terry. I don't know why it's zoomed in on that bit. So dragon robes were manufactured in imperial silk workshops in a complex and time-consuming process. Creating a single dragon robe might require up to 30 months. What's this? Is a girdle hanging? Chinese robes were constructed without pockets, so a girdle was worn over a man's robe and various small decorative cases were suspended from it. By the late Qing dynasty, men often wore a set of receptacles decorated with auspicious symbols consisting of incense bags, fan cases, eyeglass cases, money pockets, pouches for snuff or tobacco, and a case holding chopsticks and a knife. What's actually on there? Is that a dragon as well? Yeah, those are your 5-clawed dragons or whatever. What did that say that was? Oh, incense something. Case. Incense purse. Women typically did not venture far from their domestic quarters and therefore did not require the same number of cases. They would simply have worn a purse or pendant suspended from a top button of their robes. The fan. Fans have been an important accessory in China for thousands of years. Rigid, round or oval fans became popular during the Tang Dynasty but were still carried in the late 19th and 20th century. Really nice fan, isn't it? Look how detailed it is. Ooh, that's really nice. The folding fan was introduced to China from Japan via Korea during the Song Dynasty, becoming very fashionable by the early 15th century. Oh, mate, that's gorgeous. Mandarin folding fans were made in Canton, Guangzhou, during the 18th and 19th century, largely for the export market. These fans are painted with scenes of government officials called mandarins, figures in garden settings, or of elaborate battles. That's beautiful. Look at the noses. Right, rank badges. In China, embroidered symbols on clothing indicate status and endowed the individual with protective or auspicious properties. Rank badges were worn by civil and military officials to indicate rank. Various species of bird were used to denote the 9 civil ranks, while animals were used for the 9 military ranks. Oh, tiger. These squares were sewn to the front and back of the dark surcoats worn by government officials at former occasions during the Qing dynasty when the strict dress code was enforced. Shoes. Foot binding was commonly practiced among indigenous Han women. Manchu women never adopted the custom. Feet were bound from as early as 3 years of age to about 13 centimetres. In rare cases 7 centimetres, by forcing the toes under the arch and compressing the width using tightly bound bandages. Ugh. So does that mean they're going to have like mangled feet? Like if when they take the shoe off, are they like really mangled? And tiny feet were looked upon as a great source of eroticism, and girls were deemed unmarriageable if they were allowed to have natural feet. Interesting. High-ranking Manchu women wore shoes with an elevated concave heel. Yeah, it is elevated, isn't it? The tall heel kept their coat hems clean, enabled them to tower over the shorter Han women, and helped them to imitate the desired swaying gait caused by bound feet. For men, boots were seen as an indication of wealth and could only be worn by men with some position in society. Men's boots were expensive and could cost as much as a servant's yearly wage. Traditional children's clothing was made of brightly coloured cotton or silk embroidered with flowers, fruits, animals and insects, each endowed with protective properties to ward off evil as well as to bring the child success in the future. A child's first birthday was celebrated with a great feast. For this celebration, a boy would be dressed in an embroidered silk jacket and trousers. Children's booties. Little tiger hat. Hats and shoes for young children were often made in the shape of a fierce animal to fool bad spirits into thinking the child was an animal and thus not worth harming. Mouth. Looks cool from the side though, actually. Hazuki tiger hat. Sometimes bells were attached to shoes to provide an audible warning to the spirits. Very cool. So that is a glimpse of the clothing. We're going to finish with these last 2 videos here, just sort of describing the types of fashion during each dynasty. And I did actually have a sneaky watch of some of this because I was getting into it and I was trying to compare. Did I get rid of it? To get it back up again, but I was trying to compare what actual dynasty Shenhua's parents' outfits would be from. Let's see if we can get a nice something like that. Perhaps is the one that's slightly closer, but not too close, so we can get a good look at the something like that. That's a good. We'll leave it on that. And see if we can actually see similarities.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Off the Great Wall. I'm Dan.
Hey, I'm Mike.
And this is, let me just read the name of the channel out here. Off the Great Wall.
You know, Dan, you're always a well-dressed guy, except for, I don't know who the sleeves belongs to, but I'm always a t-shirt and jeans kind of man. Did you know that back in China, ancient China, men actually wore dresses?
Oh yeah? You know what? I support that. That would be like pretty super comfortable. Anyways, what's really interesting about Chinese culture is that throughout every dynasty in Chinese history, the style of clothing would adapt to the new dynasty and will last until the end of that dynasty.
Here's a look at the fashion throughout Chinese history. To kick things off, let's travel all the way back to the Xia and Shang dynasties.
The basics of traditional Chinese fashions were born during the Shang Dynasty. People wore a narrow, cuffed, knee-length shirt jacket tied with a sash with a narrow ankle-length skirt and a piece of cloth that hung down to the knees.
Clothes were generally in vivid primary colors, were green, and didn't vary much between different jobs and types of people.
But during the Zhou Dynasty, with the development of strict social hierarchy, people started to get picky.
Clothing turned into a statement. The color, the length, width, and decorations of your clothing marked your status and rank in society.
Say you wanted to wear this sick new yellow skirt your mom just made for you, but nope, too bad. Only the emperor was allowed to wear yellow. And if you were like, who cares, gonna wear it anyways, well, you're gonna die.
Other developments during the Zhou Dynasty, besides the emperor hogging all your favorite color for himself, included the first appearance of the dress jacket, which stayed popular dynasty after dynasty.
The dress jacket consisted of an upper short shirt jacket or waist jacket, tucked inside a lower floor-length skirt.
A long silk belt, usually with a ring or a piece of jade at the end, was tied around the waist, and a cotton shawl was worn around the arms.
Nice, I like cotton shawls.
I know you do.
But while the dress jacket stayed around, the Zhou Dynasty unfortunately didn't. Enter the Qing state and Qing Shi Huang, the first emperor, who defeated the 6 other warring states of China and established the Qing Dynasty.
Besides unifying China, Qin Shi Huang tried to unify clothing. What a dictator. If you're gonna give a nation a makeover, you gotta make sure it looks good, right?
Unfortunately, Qing wasn't around long enough to completely unify Chinese fashion, but he managed to unify color. The color of choice, black. Yeah, that wouldn't fly with me, as I believe in fashion, black should only be used for funerals and award ceremonies.
Yes, as you mentioned so many times. Why black, you ask? Qing was a fan of the concept of yin and yang in the 5 elements theory. Now, the Zhou Dynasty favored the color red, which was symbolic of fire.
The ancient Chinese associated the color black with the element water, so Qin Shi Huang used the color to symbolize the power of water, the Qing Dynasty, to extinguish fire, the Zhou Dynasty.
But other than color, clothing styles didn't change
Solid
much
theory.
during the Qing Dynasty. The norm was loose one-piece clothing with long, large sleeves. I like that.
Yeah, I prefer things a little more tighter.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Next up, the Han Dynasty. China's first golden age, this dynasty had a huge influence on Chinese history and culture, and it's done a good job making sure we don't forget it.
China's majority ethnic group is called the Han Chinese. Traditional dress is called Han clothing. Even the writing is known as Han characters, and the language is known as, of course, the Han language.
Han Dynasty clothing was generally dignified and elegant. During the first 200 years, the Western Han Dynasty, the dark style clothing of the Qing Dynasty, continued.
Court dress was black, while formal dress for sacrificial rites was edged with red.
Typical clothing styles included cicada-like hats, one-layer coats with twin diamond-shaped collars, sloping necklines, square sleeves, jade-hanging decorations, and red shoes. Sound like a fashion week in ancient China.
There were 2 robe styles, one with a diagonal opening and one with a straight opening. In the Eastern Han Dynasty, red replaced black as the it color, as a symbol of the Han Dynasty's fire virtue.
But people, especially government officials, also dressed seasonally, changing the color of their clothes to match the season.
As far as accessories went, there were 13 different types of hats, but be careful, you couldn't just pick and choose at will. The style of a man's crown was an indicator of his rank in society.
All right, now let's skip forward a few hundred years to the glorious, the glamorous, the one and only Tang Dynasty.
Ah yes, the peak of the Chinese civilization, a time
Tang
of
Dynasty.
unparalleled peace and prosperity and of dumplings.
And fashion.
Yes, and it was reflected in the styles of clothing of the time.
Tang Dynasty clothing was luxuriant, looser, more relaxed, and more revealing than before.
Women had several choices of outfits, including the classic short skirt jacket, tucked into a long skirt tied up high over the chest, loose-sleeved shirts with long skirts, and long shawls and loca gowns with high waistbands and full flowing skirts. I love Tang Dynasty female outfits. Love them. Most beautiful outfits ever.
Shoes were made of silk or woven from grass, and hair covered the temples, framed the face, and was tied up into a bunch of different buns.
Tied up hair. See, that is sort of tied up into a bun. Shenhua's mother's hair. But not sold on the outfits they're wearing though. It's like Tang Dynasty.
God's bun.
Yeah,
breakfast
buns. Yes, we got the buns thing. Also popular during the Tang Dynasty was a style that's now considered a trademark of traditional Chinese clothing, and one of my favorites, 大袖衫, which literally translates to big sleeved shirts. You know, people used
Big sleeve shirt. She's got big sleeves. How big her sleeves are. They're like that, proper dangling.
which literally translates
They're a bit too dangly though.
shirts. You know,
They're like crazy dangly.
I can imagine.
Carry it like that.
Don't think.
Flowers in bloom again this year.
These elegant, heavily embroidered garments were worn by Tang
Yeah,
ladies
that she's not
on
got
special occasions.
super
This type
dangly.
of dress is also often used in depictions of Chinese fairy maidens. Hey, no judgment on our ancestors.
Getting close though, like with the hairband and stuff.
We've still got another 1,000
And the bun.
years of Chinese fashion to go.
All right, Dan, I think all these styles and rules are starting to kind of blur in my non-fashion sensitive head. So we're going to start.
Okay, let's get straight
Hey guys,
into
welcome
part
to Off
2.
the Great Wall. It's Mikey.
It's Danny.
So part 2 and guides you all the way through the rest of the ancient Chinese dynasties.
I like to think that it's because we look so good.
Yeah, my t-shirt. Anyway, we last left off at the glorious Tang Dynasty. So let's travel a bit further ahead to the Song Dynasty.
This was a time of conservative moral values, when simplicity trumped opulence and flamboyance. Quite the 180 from the fabulous Tang Dynasty.
But sometimes you just gotta stick to the basics, you know? Men wore plain robes and shirts with either straight collars or diagonal collars crossed.
Straight collars or diagonal collars for men. Is that a diagonal collar?
To the right side. They wore simple
I know.
silk head coverings, the most popular being the Dongpo wrap, named after the famous poet Su Dongpo.
Women often wore the Bazi style, which consisted of a knee-length outer jacket with a straight collar, wide or narrow sleeves, and slits over 2 feet long under both armpits.
Armpits.
I hope they had deodorant back in the old days.
Grand sleeves were also popular for.
Well, that's quite like it, right? Maybe not. It's not far off though. It's getting. Oops.
Those with high
Played the wrong
social
video.
status, and were worn with a long skirt, a colorful silk shawl.
The sleeve is more accurate now.
Song Dynasty skirts were inherited from the Tang Dynasty and came in many styles, including the tulip skirt, which was dyed with tulip grass and kept the flower's fragrance. And the 100 pleated skirt, which had pleats all over and then tiny folds between those pleats.
But now we put those pretty skirts on hold as the Mongols are attacking. But don't worry, they may have invaded China, but they brought with them a great fashion sense and some sick clothing. So it's all good.
The Mongols established the Yuan dynasty, and while their clothing styles are technically considered ethnic and not traditional Chinese, we'll still consider it a part of the history of Chinese fashion as a whole.
You know what I love that the Mongols brought over?
What's that?
Hot pot and barbecue.
Oh yeah.
Skewers.
You know what I love?
What?
The hawk on Genghis Khan's shoulder. They brought over
Just stop. Stop. Joseon dresses, which combined Han and Mongol culture, were popular for all social classes and could be made
they're
from
not.
a variety of materials. The Mongols also had a thing for horses, but you couldn't really go galloping dramatically across the plain on horseback with a long billowing skirt that just spells trouble. So instead, many people wore the bijian or panzidawu, a double-sided leather coat with no collar or sleeves that was shorter in the
That's
front.
like proper
Bijian, you could ride horseback and hunt
thermal.
in style. But when they weren't galloping across the plains, the ladies of the higher classes didn't hesitate to dress up.
They wore long, loose gowns with moon-shaped shoulders, wide sleeves, and narrow cuffs, decorated with red and gold embroidered brocades, fur, and silk.
Aristocrats who were Mongolians also liked to wear leather, marten, and sheepskin coats and hats.
Nice. After the fall of the Mongols, we find ourselves in the Ming Dynasty, which took fashion advice from the dynasties of the past, the Zhou, Han, Tang, and Song.
This dynasty's elaborate clothing system, which outlined styles for formal and daily wear for all different social classes, took over 20 years to fully develop.
Ming Dynasty fashion rules were serious business. People in the Ming Dynasty preferred loose, billowing clothes.
Officials mainly wore robes and gowns with circle colors, wide sleeves, black edges, and a black ribbon hanging belt.
Gowns had square embroidery on the front and back with patterns that
so it's
varied
not
by
Ming
social
either.
class. Civil officials wore embroidered birds, while military officials wore embroidered mammals. And the emperor wore the dragon.
Of course. Ordinary men didn't get pretty animals on their clothes. Unfortunately, they wore plain, straight, long gowns and Taoist gowns. And of course, no outfit is complete without accessories. Men could choose from several dozen styles of headdresses.
Dude, I love accessories.
I know you do. Too much.
Meanwhile, the ladies of the court wore big sleeves, short tops, decorated crowns, and long shawls with phoenix and flower decorations and gold or jade hangings.
So basically, all the top dogs got to flaunt animal stitchings on their clothes. And for common women, no fancy phoenixes, only plain gowns, coats, shawls, and short tops.
Plain gowns, coats, shawls, and short tops.
Again.
Shenhua's mother's got like a belt on or something.
Usually worn with a skirt and patty robe.
Is that one of those that's supposed to have like an animal on? Like a rank thing?
Like a patty field.
Hey dude, in modern days, I would embroider mine with a Pokemon.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, that's not cool.
Okay. Ming Dynasty skirts were often pleated, light-colored, and simple, at least in the beginning.
But enough is never enough when it
Bash me
comes to
microphone
glitz and
twice in a row
glamour.
there.
So while early skirts only had embroidered designs on the bottom 2 inches, later skirts were much more highly decorated.
Finally, we reached the Qin Dynasty, which is when the
Here we go, the Qing Dynasty.
China. So Qin Dynasty fashion technically isn't a part of Han clothing, but we couldn't bring ourselves to leave it out. So here we go.
About the Qing Dynasty, probably the most recognizable style is the hairstyle of the men, where they shave the front part of the head and have a little ponytail on the back.
You can't really see that because he's wearing a hat.
One guy, I saw a movie, he trained his ponytail to be like a whip.
Oh, I've seen that.
He was like whipping people with it, and he was called God Whip. The Chinese adopted Manchurian-style clothing, which was characterized by a rectangular waistless
silhouette. See, like none of this clothing really matches these parents.
Saddle-shaped collars,
at least from these drawings.
Designs.
And of course, one of the most well-known traditional garments is the qipao. But it might surprise you to know that this is actually a Manchurian invention.
Can I just say?
Colourful outfit of Shenhua's real mother may mean that she comes from a wealthy family if not related to the imperial family. What kind of clothing would you reckon this is then, Terry? Like is it from a particular dynasty or is it just general fancy clothing that they went with?
Qipao is one of my favorite like outfits for females.
High five. I love it.
This looks so beautiful. The name comes from the Qi people, another name for the Manchurians. Manchu rulers organized their people into...
I mean, this sort of side collar, I suppose that's more there. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really match it up with the fashions. Maybe from a tribe in China.
To be known as the banner dress qipao.
Manchurian ladies were also well known for their shoes. Ladies, you think your high heels are a pain? Check out these crazy heels.
The Manchu flower pot shoes or horse hoof shoes had 4-inch high raised soles, not at the end where the heel is.
There are many small tribes in ancient China Okay.
These shoes made the ladies look taller and more slender.
Imagine like if you're wearing these shoes and someone was chasing you.
Oh yeah.
How would you run in those?
Actually, I think those shoes are a lot better for women's feet than high heels.
Yeah, I heard like women, if you wear high heels for a long time,
oh, it's gonna warp your feet.
Yeah, it actually messes you up really good.
It actually really, it also messes up your whole everything.
But this is also the time when binding the feet was commonplace. So a lot of these women, they will squeeze into like a looks like a little kid's
That's
shoe.
shocking, isn't it? That.
That lasted for a long time.
Yeah.
There's some creepy posts on the internet about that stuff.
Can I just say, you got the good-looking cheap hall, but I don't.
Crazy guys. Right. Went on a little bit too long today, guys, but hopefully you've enjoyed what we went over. Bits and bobs, a little bit all over the place. Like I say, I've been away for just over a month now, so I'm a bit rusty on this whole stuff, but it's been fun. Learning about the dynasties with you guys, learning about the Emperor a little bit, relating that to Shenmue 3, especially with the Verdant Bridge, and that information there on the Shuangtong Emperor. Again, we're sort of left with more questions than answers, but that's mainly just because of how the story's been told so far in Shenmue. Without really knowing which way the games are going to go, it's hard to take a lot of this information that's actually based on real-world China and history and how that actually is going to flow into Shenmue, because Shenmue seems to maybe just be going off into its own sort of area now. Maybe it's touched upon these real-world themes with the actual Shuangtong Emperor. Not really named him actually as Puyi, but obviously Shuangtong Emperor was Emperor Puyi. So they've got the timeline correct, but then they've kind of come up with their own story on this, sort of sending an envoy to a fictitious village, this Bailey village. The mirrors are fictitious because none of that is related to anything that we've just learned today. So I think this is heading into Yu Suzuki's brain now, and whatever he'd learned maybe from his trips to China, or whatever he's read, or the team that were developing the games back in the day were reading, when they came up with the scripts, or whatever they're basing the story on, maybe they just pulled little bits of bobs of like real life stuff, which is cool that you can see the things that they've pulled upon, in terms of like clothing ranks, style of clothing perhaps, location, years, dates, the emperor at the time. But then beyond that, like, that's all within a bubble, but beyond that, Shenmue's going to go off in its own direction, and I don't think until we actually get a Shenmue 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, we're ever going to be able to figure this out without, actually finding the answers to the questions from Yu Suzuki himself or whatever. But in spite of all that, it's still quite fun to actually learn, and because of Shenmue, we can learn about these things of Chinese history, the dynasties, even dynasties that obviously aren't even mentioned in Shenmue. It's just interesting to learn how China as a country has actually developed throughout its history. And yeah, I mean, without Shenmue I probably wouldn't care about any of this stuff, but it's actually really interesting to see this other culture, this other country, and its heritage. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed that, guys. This is episode 9. I was going to say that it's the penultimate episode. I was thinking of just doing like a round number of 10. And my plan for the next episode, if we do it in 2 weeks' time, let me just double check the date there, because I have got... It probably won't be in 2 weeks' time, actually, because that is my ceremony date. So potentially I'll have to speak to Matt as well. Maybe the 10th episode might not even fall on a Friday at 9 PM. It might just be like a random thing. But I thought for the 10th one we could have a bit of a nice stream with Matt, get Matt involved, and maybe go through, maybe just have like a big long discussion about the chapter tiles, what we we think Shenmue story is heading in, or where it's heading rather, and see if we can work some stuff out there based on all the stuff that I've learned in the last 9 episodes, which goes in one ear and goes out the other. So I don't know if I'll be much use despite all this, but you know, it's fun to talk Shenmue. Hopefully you agree. So yeah, guys, thank you all for joining. Everyone that was in the chat chatting away. Thanks, Rhino. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, mate. You're not going, are you? Is anyone going to the Sonic concert tomorrow in London? The Barbican Centre or whatever it's called. I can't wait, man. I can't believe it's come round. Like, I should really be in bed now because I've got to get up early. I've got a lot of driving to do tomorrow. And I probably won't get home till quite late on the back end. Yeah, looking forward to it. You're not going? Oh well. They are doing like a world tour, so maybe you'll get a chance at some point, Rhino. Or you can rewatch the stream. So it has already been streamed at one point, the first time they did it. If you haven't seen that, that's worth watching. Yeah, definitely, Terry. It's just like a lot of people were saying. It was like, it's quite, what were they saying earlier? People like Richard and stuff were saying it just goes sort of over the reds. A lot of the stuff. It's very well thought out. Like the whole Shenmue storyline. Like hopefully it's still as well thought out, and it wasn't just like a Shenmue 1 and 2 having these huge teams of people that sort of collated and came up with this epic storyline that's not so much in Shenmue 3, but obviously there is still glimpses of that. Yeah, hopefully we do get some answers to these pending questions. But yeah, right guys, I'm going to end it there. Just expect a stream to be dropped on you randomly. As far as Dojo content and stuff is concerned, we just released an actual interview with Yu Suzuki that you can check out now. Mentioned Shenmue a little bit, but it is mainly an Air Twister interview. Seems to have gone down quite well within the community, so yeah, check the interview out. Matt will have a video with you tomorrow, is it? Is it Saturdays, I think, that Matt does his weekly videos? And then we'll be releasing a podcast probably next week sometime. And yeah, quite a few things knocking about. Cheers, Terry. Terry's dropped a link in the chat there, guys. If you haven't seen the Air Twister interview yet, go click on that. And yeah, really fun interview with Yu Suzuki. Talking about the upcoming console and PC release of Air Twister. So yeah, stalling until the clock turns midnight, which it has done now. So I'm going to shoot, guys. Thanks again for watching, and see you soon. Take care. Peace.